4, 5, 6 feet, whatever it is. Lady was in the middle of a shower, decided to come out and chew me out because I cut her power line. All right. 7 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started. 1.1, call the meeting to order. 1.2, approval of the agenda.
Move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Been moved by Randy and seconded by Jeff to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye. Aye. 2.1, approval of consent agenda.
Consent agenda is pretty typical today. We have the basic paying of the bills that we have there, personnel update. We have one resignation and another recommendation for hire. A new position is actually a transfer within the district. And then the site council meetings, meeting minutes from, I believe, is middle school. So, any questions specifically on any of those?
Move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Randy and seconded by Jennifer to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Nothing was removed. So 4.1, audience of patrons.
We do have 2 patrons that asked to visit with us tonight, and they completed the paperwork to do that. First one will be Kyle Adams, and the second one will be Scott Hill. So Kyle, we'll let you go first.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I've got several prepared comments I'd like to make, and I've got some questions kind of embedded, and I thought if it feels okay, I might just go through my whole comments. And if there's any questions you want to address or can address, maybe we can do that at the end, if you like. If not, I guess you can interrupt me and we can do that as we go. In regards to COVID, I believe that instead of more mandates, orders, and threats, our community needs more leadership. We need more listening, more data, better communication, and solutions grounded in common sense. I thank the board for the role that they've played in keeping our kids in school. I thank you for your leadership. I thank our teachers and our staff and the accommodations they have made for our students to be in school. Our kids that want to be in school need more advocates, so that's why I'm here tonight. I want to talk about our current quarantine policy and the consistency in which the policies are applied. If nothing else, I hope to convey why several of us are pretty frustrated with some things here lately. I'm the parent of 2 high school students who've each been quarantined twice so far. They have much more anxiety about the threat of quarantine than they do the virus itself. They go to school every day wondering if this will be the last day that they can go to school. Our system is such that if you want to be in school, the best case scenario is you get the virus, you be out your 10 days, then you're exempt for quarantine for 90 days. The next best, go to school and then go home. If you want to be in school and you want to participate in activities, then your odds of quarantine go up significantly. We are taking our most motivated students, and certainly the healthiest in our whole population, and sending them home to literally sit on the couch. If the temptation is to eliminate activities because it's the easy thing to do, that would be tragic for our kids. They get one shot at so many school experiences that become part of who they will be as adults, not to mention lasting memories. They've already given up enough. Being forced to sit home cannot be the best solution. Being penalized for wanting to be an active student is not the best solution. Why is our policy so restrictive? When everyone is a mask, why can't positive students isolate and school contacts stay in school? I understand that other schools have this type of policy. Our students can follow every rule, do everything they were told while in school, yet they are sent home because they sat in their assigned seat behind a classmate 5 feet 10 inches away while wearing a mask. They can wear a mask all practice long and stand in line spaced apart, but it doesn't keep them from getting quarantined. It was reported at a previous meeting that 2% of quarantined students have turned up positive. So 2 out of 100. And you don't even know if those 2 got it at school or maybe they got it through some other activity. So we have 98 healthy kids at home with minimal social contact and no physical activity. I understand we have physical limitations in our schools. We can't control that, but we do control the policies. Who is ultimately responsible for the policy? What is the goal of the policy? Is the intent to protect the student or those around them? Quarantining healthy students is not protecting them. Forcing them home to be with grandparents because their parents have to work is not protecting those around them. And with every quarantine, the rules are taken a little less seriously because people are just getting tired of it. If you want to control their behavior for their own best interest, then keep them in school and keep them in activities. Regarding consistent application of policies in place, I may be misinformed. Most of my information is coming from teenagers. So if I am wrong, then I do apologize. Our high school boys basketball team practiced in mass back in July. A player tested positive, but no one was put in quarantine, nor did anyone ever test positive afterwards. Last month, with even more precautions taken in practice, a player tested positive and the whole team was quarantined. Why is it different now? Another example is the use of video. I understand that video is used to contact trace in hallways, and even minutes are counted for the time people spend in the bathroom. Video from school buses has been used to identify contact. Yet again, back to the sports practice example, why isn't video used to identify contact in the practice? Why are we making all these accommodations when they don't matter? If the answer for all school activities is just a blanket quarantine, no matter the scenario, then just tell us up front and explain why. If the activity does not justify the risk of missing school, then the student can choose whether to participate. These types of real or even perceived inconsistencies are causing a lot of frustration for those on the receiving end of a quarantine call. If we knew the rules and they were clear and consistent, even if we didn't like them, you would get better support. Who is ultimately responsible for deciding who is quarantined through school or activity contact? How are those decisions even made? Thank you again for this opportunity. I mentioned leadership earlier. Leaders are oftentimes faced with choosing courage or comfort because you can't have both. You've made responsible decisions for the well-being of our students. Continue to be courageous with your decisions and consider a less restrictive and more consistent quarantine policy when students come back from winter break. Those are my comments. I put some questions. If you'd like to go through those, I'd be happy to. If not, I understand.
I can answer some of those if you'd
Yeah,
like.
you're welcome to.
I did spend some time visiting with Dr. Holmes this morning. And you mentioned, you asked why the change from what we had this summer. Even, I would go even as far as to say there's been a change from what we did this fall with volleyball and football. And the changes that have been implemented have been done so through the direction of our county health officer, Dr. Holmes. I think probably at the risk of perhaps putting words into his mouth, I think I can explain it a little bit in that why is it different now than it was this fall? And I think the lion's share of that is because of the increased number of cases that we have in Dickinson County, and more than that, the capacity of the local hospital. That I know is a great concern to Dr. Holmes about 3 weeks ago or so when we started visiting about that. And so it's my assumption, and I know that word assume can do some things for you, that if we reel in the sum of what we were doing before, and the target that is being reeled in at this point is our team activities, hopefully prevent a situation where an emergency setting can't get some help at our local hospital and has to be taken to one further down the road. I think that's the primary reason as to why things are different. But from the board's perspective, we've spent quite a bit of time figuring out what's in our lane and what's not, and quarantines are not in the school board's lane. That's going to be in the county health officer's lane or / the county commissioners. So I think that's where we're at on on that particular question.
One I'm curious about too, and it's related, but within, how are the quarantine decisions being made? I mean, I know the policy is set by the county and or the medical officer, but how are the decisions being made when they happen? Is the county or the officer consulted on every case, or are we is someone inside the walls making those decisions?
I believe that most of the decisions are made locally. From the team's perspective, that's kind of the practice right now. I know that has caused some consternation in the other school districts in Dickinson County as well. I visited with one of the superintendents this morning. From the aspect of bus quarantines, classroom quarantines, the whole 9 yards, our nurses go in and actually measure some distance between kids and establish the quarantines list from that.
Is that list then sent to the health department?
I believe that is. Now, that's a detail, Brandy, I'll go ahead and let you answer. Is that list sent to the health department at that point, or?
Classroom quarantines or not, we are given the authority to measure, and I do that, and Lacey does that as well. Either the two of us do, it is always with another person. Generally, we do that with the principal. And so it's determined to who falls within that 6-foot guideline. So that's the classroom context. As far as team quarantines, that information is sent to the county, and they help make that determination on, they're given the information of who the positive person is, and they ask questions about the activity, depending on if they understand what that activity is. Absolutely, people understand basketball, they may not understand wrestling or a musical, for instance. And so that information then is sent to them, and then they make that determination about who should be quarantined. They'll ask questions, a variety of questions, and we try to answer those. And we have to sometimes poll coaches. The athletic directors are included in those conversations as well.
If I can go back to, Kyle made the comment about using the video cameras to see, like at practice, is that ever requested by those officials making that decision on who to quarantine? I know a couple of times parents have had their child quarantined and say, my kid wasn't even at practice that day. So I think maybe utilizing that would help maybe a little bit of the frustration, rather than getting a call and say, like the parents are having to stand up for their child saying, my child wasn't even there, why is he quarantined? So could we use that video as a reference?
I don't know the answer to that. The one thing that I do know is KDHE has issued new guidance. It was in November. I believe I shared that with you because I requested that from the health department to get that actual, the verbiage, because
Right.
I don't deal in that part. That is what they do. And because of that, because of the nature of the whole practice session, they determine that the team is indeed included. I know that if a student wasn't at practice and I'm given that information, then they are removed from that list. But some of it depends on when the student began becoming symptomatic. And sometimes we have kids that are symptomatic that come for 4 days. And so you have 4 days of symptoms plus 2 days of non-symptomatic contagion. And so it very well could be true that somebody wasn't at practice on Wednesday, but that particular person who is positive could have been contagious Monday and Tuesday as well. And so they were at that practice. When I do a quarantine list, I go back and I look at if that student was in school. I look at their attendance. Okay. So if I have a list of 50 kids, I go back and I check their attendance. I try my best to whittle the list down as much as I can. Right. I quarantined my own children multiple times. My kids have collectively been quarantined 16 weeks. And so I understand that as a parent, absolutely. I do, and my kids have missed really important things that they were really looking forward to. And it hurts your heart. It absolutely does.
Can I go back to the instance when we had a case and then they quarantined a whole bus? And we really questioned that, and then they looked at that and they revised that and said, okay, no, that probably is a little drastic. Can this quarantining the whole team, can that be something that we can go back and re-ask them about to see if it's necessary?
Well, as I understand it, Dr. Holmes has contacted Dr. Farha, the state epidemiologist, to ask about athletics, and to get information about that, what that looks like. And Dr. Farha, who I believe is the state head epidemiologist, don't quote me on that, but I know she is very high up there, made the comment that due to the higher risk nature of the athletics, that that is the rationale that they have in making those decisions. And so that is where they wrote that guidance as far as enlisted specific activities and athletics in that. And so that is where, because the bus issue, Dr. Holmes did contact them as well.
Right.
We had requested, can you look into this further? Of course, can you get them to reevaluate? And he did. He asked just this weekend about the basketball situation. We have, I can tell you we aren't the only community that's experiencing this. I run this weekend's wrestling tournament. I have 3 teams that have had to cancel due to being quarantined for COVID. Concordia's JV girls basketball team is quarantined because they played a team that had a positive player. And I know there are other teams out there. Those are just the ones that I know specifically that are involved.
And I realize a game situation, but like the middle school practice where I know that they have taken steps to limit contact, practice in pods, and do, some additional steps where they can, but then they were all still quarantined.
Are you wrestling? I'm sorry. I didn't know the beginning.
Yes, wrestling.
Okay. For wrestling is also considered a very high risk activity.
Right.
Obviously, I'm a wrestling mom. So I'm very familiar with that. I'm in those. I've been in wrestling rooms for many years. With that particular room that we are looking at, it has probably the poorest ventilation out of any area in our district. That's a tornado shelter, so there is no inward or outward flow of air. Those students all run laps. That's part of the conditioning. They do monkey rolls. They do a lot of very exertional type activities where air is being expelled. And even with a mask on, that's not going to hold those air droplets. And because of that movement, that puts that at a significantly higher risk, even though they are. Now, that facility versus our high school facility, that might be looked at differently. And I brought that into, the health department asks that information when we have a case, we look at all pieces of that and I give them all of that information and then they utilize that to make the best decision in that particular moment.
With regards to ventilation of classrooms or spaces, or is there anything that we're not doing? Because sometimes it feels as though, okay, well, we've learned this lesson. Okay, we make some changes. Is there anything that is less reactive and more proactive that we should be doing that we're not? And I mean, is there something that, and you may not be able to answer this, but these are the questions that I think of that are going, okay, look, we're spacing kids as far as we can. We're practicing in masks, and that doesn't seem to help. So in any situation, I mean, have they come out with new best practices for us that we're not attempting that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of. In the classroom setting, they I will tell you, you know, you walk into a classroom and you find this one classroom that, wow, this seating arrangement has really taken out a lot of kids. So when I notice that, I bring that to the attention of the administrator of that building, and then we try to get that taken. After our first round, we had multiple teachers that changed their seating, you know, because we learned that this probably isn't the best. Now, there are some limitations, of course. You know, if we can only fit so many bodies and spread them out as good as we can, which we are all well aware of. Some classrooms are just easier to do that in than others. I do think that they're doing the best they can, but when you put 30 kids into a classroom, that's hard. There's a couple classrooms from this weekend that I pointed out, I think, you know, that maybe we can look at some options for those to perhaps eliminate a couple more kids. I mean, my goal is to try to reduce it clear down to, I would love it. I had
Bare
a
minimum.
case 2 weeks ago that positive case had one contact. I was so stinking excited, you have no idea. I mean, it was amazing because I felt like, okay, we've made progress here. I can't say that that's always the case.
Well, from our initial round of quarantines, the very first time we did it, it was about a 20 kid. Now, if you're looking at just raw numbers, it seems to be in that 9 to 10 range. So, I mean, it's evident that we've done some things differently. I think where the frustration lies with a lot of people is just when it seems more like a blanket quarantine and there's no reward for positive behavior. You know, you spread yourself out, you wear your mask, you do the things that we're being asked to do, and then we're in a gymnasium and they say, well, everybody's got to be done. So
I disagree with that a little bit because I think something that sounds like we're overlooking or not addressing is the mitigations we take aren't to avoid quarantine. They're to avoid COVID. And when we look at it, we have 2%, what you said, of our,
That came out of the meeting,
kids.
this meeting.
right, so
Yeah.
2% of the ones that have been quarantined. That's pretty good. That means when a kid gets it, we're not spreading it to high percentages of kids. So what we are doing is successful as far as combating against COVID, not combating against quarantine. I'm in the same boat. I got 3 kids. All 3 of my kids have been quarantined at least once. I'm not saying it's a good deal, but the fight isn't against quarantine, it's against COVID. You know, we're trying to keep people healthy. That, you know, is the whole reason for that, not to keep them off quarantine. We want to do that, yes, but the ultimate goal is health. And when we've only got 2% of people that have been quarantined getting it, then we also have to look at that we are doing a good job with that too. So.
I mean, I agree with that. That's a good point, Rob. There are some things that I'd still like to see us doing. We talked, it feels like a long time ago about, I don't mean to say that insulting, but I just haven't heard about it again, is at the high school, putting some kids in the auditorium and letting them Zoom into class so that, you know, my daughter's in a class and she told me, Mom, there is no way we can get 6 feet apart. We're practically right next to each other. And if we've got 2 or 3 classrooms like that, it doesn't seem to me like the auditorium thing is a bad idea to split kids up in pods and have them sit in certain sections of the auditorium and just Zoom into that class so that they're at school with caring adults, making sure they're wearing their masks all day. They're not running around in the streets and hanging out with each other. They're getting lunch. And I'd like to see us revisit that thought if it hasn't already. And it might be that I just haven't done my part and reached out to see where we're at on it. But
I think it's because we were having the VOAG classes in those spaces. And now that they can move into the VOAG building, I think maybe they're free now. But I believe they were having classes in those spaces already.
There was some of that
before
going
wrestling
on.
season. Mhm.
any other questions for Mr. Adams?
Well,
Thoughts, comments?
I know part of the frustration, I know what everybody's we have reduced the quarantine rate down. It's gone down from 20 to 9 or 10 or so, but where we are getting hit hard is when a blanket team gets quarantined. And am I understanding this right then, Brandy? That is guidance set by KDHE. Dr. Holmes is following that guidance. We as a board cannot change that. I mean, that's what we have to work with. So regardless of whether we space them out, we wear a mask, we do all this stuff, the entire team is going to get quarantined and we can't change that. Is that correct?
As it is written, yes.
For those high-risk sports?
For those
correct.
higher-risk activities, because there's some activities that are included in that music, and other activities that we potentially don't have. But yes, you are correct.
We don't
that
really have the
information
authority to give any relief on that.
Does that count for our physical education classes and weights classes and things like that too, or is that still?
That question's been asked. Weights class, because they're in specific groups, I've been able to isolate it to that group because they aren't doing the running, they aren't doing intermittent potential for droplet exchange with the people that are over there. They aren't doing running activities. For physical education, I look at what the activity is. And we have consulted with them as far as that goes. That question was asked last week in our county meeting about physical education. There's not been something that specifically has come up there. Our physical education classes have kind of, at least with most of the ones that I've had to deal with within a physical education class, within a positive student, they've been doing more individual type things. So there's maybe been 1 to 2 people because they aren't intermingling with people.
Do we have any classrooms in our buildings in the district that would be of concern, like the wrestling room? Are most of our classrooms ventilated properly? Has that ever come into question? Is that going to come into question?
At the beginning of the school year, Dr. Holmes and John Holgren went through each building with the school nurses, with Mr. Brown, with the building administrator, and he kind of addressed issues, that he saw within each area. His suggestion was to open windows and leave doors open. That's becoming more of a challenge now that we have hit colder weather. It was a possibility, obviously, much earlier, and we've been fortunate that we've had some pretty decent weather, but that's hard now because it's cold weather, so it's hard to do that. It's also difficult to leave. Part of our issue with some of that too is safety. We've taken all these all these steps for safety for our schools, and some of these counteract some of those safety measures. So you kind of have to take some of that into account as well.
Right.
But largely, teachers were trying to leave windows open, run the fans, that type of thing, to help with air ventilation.
Right, but right now, since it is cold and the windows are going to be closed, are we going to run into that situation is what my question is.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, if logically thinking, yes, I could see that becoming an issue more so, but it's difficult.
We could run a fan? Would that help us
And they do
not,
inside fans.
I'm trying to think of things that we don't have that situation in a classroom.
Right.
Like now that we've had an instance come up where this room, the kids were quarantined because of shared air, I'm concerned that are any of our classrooms in that danger zone? And if they are, what can we do
To try to prevent.
to prevent that?
The classrooms fall into a little bit different scenario because it's not an exertional high-risk activity. So the reason for the wrestling room is they're in a full exertional type activity in a very poorly ventilated space there. The classrooms, for the most part, they aren't doing that type of activity. At least I hope they're not in there.
Well, right, but still the air, if there's no air circulation.
There's nothing that addresses that specifically in the
Okay.
PHE guidance.
Okay,
But as far as trying to look at all avenues of prevention, certainly fans can help circulate air.
right, okay.
Well,
One last question. Sure. Is that 2% that we were talking about of quarantines converting to positive, is that still an accurate number, or do you have any idea on that?
I don't know where that 2% number came from. I can
Okay.
tell you how many.
I know you've given us the number of conversions, which I appreciate having that, but I have no idea how many have been quarantined because that number has just grown exponentially. And
I do not know the number of quarantines as a total. I just know that out of those students who were quarantined, as a result, 32 of those students became positive. 32 students or staff became positive after being quarantined.
And was that from, you may not know this, but was that from school contact or social contact?
It's a mix.
Okay.
There are some that I can definitely tell you, they converted positive on day 10 of their quarantine out of this group. And there are some that I have no idea where that came from. Some of it could be a household. I haven't differentiated, but there've been a healthy mix of both.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time and questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we got Scott Hill, you're next up.
Thank you, Superintendent Brown and education members. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you, and I certainly appreciate each one of you's service. I have served on boards like this and realize that it's kind of a thankless job, and particularly in times where you have to make difficult decisions that don't seem to make anybody happy. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I have some kind of support literature here. I kind of threw this together quick, so if you could pass those around. Let me introduce myself. My name is Scott Hill. I live north of town, up by the Buckeye community. I have a PhD in animal science physiology. In addition to that, I'm a statistician and enjoy numbers, working with numbers, and have published numerous papers. It's interesting for me to look at the data that's being presented and the virus that's being circulated. It's fascinating because as an animal scientist, we deal with viruses all the time. And of course, approach is a little bit different sometimes with animals. At other times, it's very similar. I want to talk to you just real briefly about a virus. What I got, 10 minutes?
Probably 5-10 minutes.
You know, we get into a lot about people on different sides of issues. We get into people concerned about how things are being administrated, but all of that doesn't matter to the virus at all. It really doesn't care about what decisions you make. It really doesn't care about decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. All it really cares about is a host. And you have to understand that in this room, there are actually 3 different types of people. And some of you might look at it and say, it looks like a whole lot more than 3 types of people here. But as far as the virus is concerned, there are only 3 types of people here. And the first one of those types of people are those that have a natural immunity to the virus. And there's a percentage in every population that has that. We don't know what that number is, but it exists. And a lot of times it's 25 to 30% of the population. The second type of people are those that have a response to the virus. They become infected. And those are people that we can track. We know the numbers on those. We can test for antibodies. The third type of people that exist in this room are those that are naive and have not contracted the virus. And those are the ones that you guys are worried about, the whole country is worried about, okay? Now, COVID's a really unique virus in a lot of ways. It is a true naive, novel virus. We've never seen it before in the human population. And so we get a wide variation of response to that. Some people become desperately ill. The vast majority of people don't. You've heard this over and over again. One of the things that's really interesting about COVID, though, it doesn't change genetically, hardly at all. We have seen very little variation in it genetically, which is really a good thing. It enables us to establish immunity against it. The second thing that's really interesting about COVID is that it responds really good to antibodies. And so that makes it an easy virus to defeat long term. These are good things to know. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. And actually the light at the end of the tunnel is when category 1 and category 2 reach the point that there are less hosts available than it takes to sustain the virus. A virus cannot live on its own. It has to have a host. It's like a cell parasite. It can't live, it can't reproduce without a host, okay? Now, a little bit more specifically, the challenges you guys are faced with. And particularly, I hear you talking a lot about the quarantine. The change in thought has really evolved with COVID-19 over the course of, when we started out in March, we really didn't know much. And then as the summer went along and we got into schools again, we really started to evolve our thought process. And the reason the thought process is evolving is because of numbers and data. And the common thought process now, all the way from the national level down, is that children are really not at risk in a school setting. And the data backs that all up. If you look through this, the number of kids that are being infected is really low. And those that are dying is really, really low. The current numbers are about 1 in 33,000 children will die from this virus that are infected. That is a minuscule number. And so it is one of the things that helps you out in the fact that it reduces liability, okay? The other thing that's really interesting is we're finding out that children are not infected in school. The infection rate in school, if you look down there, I highlighted it on the first page, is 0.13%. And this has been documented in large studies. If you've heard about the debacle that happened in New York City, that number was supported in New York City. Children are not being infected in schools. There are no super spreader events in schools. We're not seeing kids take virus home from school and cause major outbreaks. So the idea that schools would be the center of virus transmission has been negated. Now, it's primarily because of the good work that's being done both here and all across the country, but also it's because children do not seem to have the affinity to spread the virus that adults do. And we don't exactly know why that is. There's some thought out there that children don't get as much respiratory stress from the virus, and so they expel less, they cough less, they sneeze less. And so they're putting less droplets into the air. That hasn't been proven for sure, but that seems to be a likely possibility. So that's really good news for you too. Now, one of the things that you need to look at though is that when we quarantine children and send them home, and this is the same thing as when we quarantined adults at the start of this thing, people don't quarantine. Okay, as an animal scientist, when I quarantine an animal, it has no contact with another animal. It is by itself, in a pen by itself. We use the term quarantine, it is a bogus term. When your kids go home, they don't sit in a room by themselves, totally isolated. Totally isolated on restroom facilities, totally isolated on food facilities, totally isolated on social facilities. If you believe that they do, I think you're naive. We know that what happens is they interact with other people, they interact with their family. In many cases, they're interacting with their peer groups, their social groups. What is happening is, and it was brought up as we talked about where are these kids getting the virus from, what is happening is they're probably a whole lot more likely to pick up the virus from a quarantine than they are from being in your school. Now, I realize that there is documents out there. There are medical professionals out there that are telling you differently than that. But I think if you look nationwide, if you look at the CDC's recommendations, the National Health Institute recommendations, they are saying keep the kids in school. Keep the kids in school. That is the safest place for them. I realize locally here, that's not necessarily what you're hearing. Okay? But I do want to reinforce something. I spent 4 years on the State Board of Education. I spent a lot of time looking at educational law. And unless the Kansas Constitution has changed a lot, the 7 of you sitting right here are responsible for the governance, the running, the regulations of your school. It is not administrative personnel from the state level, nor is it administrative personnel from the local level that determine who is in charge of our schools. According to Kansas law, as long as you are not out of compliance with Kansas law, you are in charge of your schools. And it was something that when I was on the State Board of Education, I tried very much to continue and strengthen, because I believe that you are the people that know best what's best for the kids in Abilene, Kansas. With saying that, I appreciate the decisions you make. And I don't have any horses in the game. I don't care, I don't have kids here, I don't have kids that are being quarantined. But I do think that when you make informed decisions, you need to not only listen to what people tell you from administrative positions, but you also need to look at the data yourselves and come to reasonable conclusions that work in your community. Thank you very much for your time. I would be glad to answer any questions that I can do while I still can kind of breathe here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Any questions, anybody?
You make a strong case that the kids are not the ones bringing it into the classroom, and that they're not transmitting. I mean, I think that's where a lot of, I don't want to say fear, but a lot of anxiety probably is with our staff, especially thinking that is getting spread from the kids. What is your take on that? Or you don't feel that is the case, or?
The numbers nationwide, and I obviously don't know the numbers within your school, okay? And I assume that you guys have done some attempts to tell where infection comes from. Very difficult to do, right? Because we have contact with a lot of different people throughout the day. But the numbers nationwide indicate that the vast majority of people, 2/3 or better, are becoming infected because of social gatherings they're at. And we probably know that in Dickinson County. Churches and other assemblies where a lot of people are together, it's probably where most of the infections are coming from. Conversely, what we've seen is, if you look nationwide, is there's very low incidence of infection in a school. I think this number is right. I think this 0.13 is correct. I think it's well supported. If you look, it was 200,000 students. As a statistician and a researcher, those are good numbers. And it was a well-done study. Kids are not getting infected in school. And, you know, as I said, you guys are doing a good job of it. You know, one of the documents that's in here is the KDHE document. And if you look at it, you will not find mentioned in there anywhere shared air. Their requirements say 10 minutes, 6 feet is a contact. Interestingly, they also state in their recommendations that this thing here has no relevance. It's irrelevant when looking at contact tracing. So it doesn't matter whether both students have a mask on or not. They look only at, in their recommendations, 6 feet, 10 minutes. I also have the state board's recommendations in there, which have been modified as of December 11th, very recently anyway. The state board is encouraging elementary students to be in school. And they are suggesting that even when the threshold levels reach a point in communities that trigger distance learning, that the schools do not abide by that. And I think that is in harmony with what's coming down from the federal level too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, 5.1. We'll just keep on talking about COVID.
We will, by golly.
If I might.
5.1, we have explained in writing. I'm not going to run through all of that for the public, but some of the things that have gone on since our last board meeting. We did some surveys from our patrons, from certified staff, and from classified staff. We also had a meeting on it's been Tuesday, November 17th, I believe, with some folks from the county, as well as representation from our school district, where we discussed, among many other things, the recommendations at that point that were received, I believe, the day before from Dr. Holmes to consider going into remote learning, 6/12, and then also putting the winter sports programs on the shelf until after Christmas. That also then kind of prompted some written document resolution from the ANEA here locally from some of our teachers, and then we have just been pretty busy monitoring our day-to-day sick or level of health, as well as our quarantine numbers. Through the surveys that we had, it became pretty evident that our public was really hoping that we would stay in a face-to-face instructional setting as much as possible. That was shared with that group on Tuesday, November 17th. And we visited, I've been informed by one of my administrators that some of the teachers are asking the question point blank, why did we not follow Dr. Holmes' recommendations? It's pretty obvious that our neighboring school district did, and why did we not? I think it's a fair question. So I said that I would answer that very succinctly here tonight. And the main reason that we did not follow those recommendations stems back to our meeting on November 17th. We asked Dr. Holmes, who was present at that meeting, recommendations. Are you expecting all of the school districts in the Dickinson County to follow that? And why are they written as a recommendation and not as an order? And he stated that provided the school district some flexibility to respond to the level of sickness that we have within our districts. And from the board's perspective, from the superintendent's guidance perspective, we chose to continue to move forward with the processes that we've had in order. I want to thank Brandy for giving us regular information on the health of our schools, of our district, and we chose to stay in session. Likewise, with the activities, we felt that it was best to go ahead and give it a shot, knowing that we do not have guarantees and that we might lose out a week or two with sickness on the basketball or the wrestling teams. But to say that we're going to give up the month of December with the hopes that the month of January would be significantly different seemed counterproductive. And so that's why those recommendations were not followed. Had they been written as an order from the county health officer, again, as we've explained earlier, we would have had no recourse on that. That would have been how we would have done business. What we did have a couple schools in remote learning on that day when we were talking about that. Kennedy Elementary and our middle school were both placed in remote learning as what was deemed necessary, again, because of the health of those two specific buildings. So we monitor that every day. The other survey that we had that really captured our attention, quite frankly, was from our teachers. There's no question that our teachers are working harder and more deliberately than they have ever done in their entire lives. And this is an extremely challenging time. And it is placing them at a level of stress that's been unmatched to any other time in any of our careers. I've done this business for, God, I'm getting freaking old, guys. I'm 39 years in education, and there's never been anything like this that has added stress to people. And so even though we, as administratively, are recommending hanging in there with school, hanging in there with the activities, we're also recommending we've got to do something different for our teachers. And I have spoken with various board members from time to time on an informal basis, and I believe I can speak to their hearts as well. They see that. We cannot just keep doing what we've been doing. It's not workable. And I think that does get to the heartbeat of the resolution from our ANEA folks. I do have you all here in the room. If one of you would like to speak to your resolution at this point, we'll let you do that.
I am Laura Ralph. I'm the looping teacher at McKinley. I'm also the treasurer for our local ANEA. I just wanted to start with thanking you for the opportunity to come visit with you about the resolution. I know Mr. Dan Brown had emailed it to all of you, and I know that you had a chance probably to read over that. We submitted that to you a couple of weeks ago as we came back from Thanksgiving break. And the time frame for this debate and the issue is really elapsed. We're not here to debate it, but it was a resolution that we needed to share with you. I do want to explain the reason behind it and answer any questions that you might have. As you know, Mr. Brown just talked about the survey that was sent out to the staff, and it was really obvious and that overwhelmingly the teachers needed some support. They're struggling for, a multitude of reasons. ANEA was contacted by several individuals asking what we could do. Teachers were not only considering the mental and physical health of their students, but they were also wanting to advocate for their own health and that of their peers. So ANEA, we started with sending out our own one-question survey asking certified staff if they felt like we should be remote or should not be remote during that time regarding the recommendation by Dr. Holmes. From those surveys, 61 of the 91 responses that we received from the certified teachers were yes, they felt like we should be remote. ANEA's job is to advocate for the school staff, and we felt the best way to do that would be by sending you the resolution. We wanted to send just a clear and concise message that approximately 2/3 of our certified staff didn't agree with staying face-to-face during that Thanksgiving to Christmas break time. In visiting with Dr. Holmes, I asked him point blank why he recommended 6 through 12 and not all students being remote, and his answer was simply that he knew that there's hardships for those younger kids, the pre-K through 5th, being remote, and he simply didn't think that the board would be able to agree to that because we all know that's really hard on the families. We do know that kids are asymptomatic spreaders. He described the virus to me as one that spreads quickly because there are so many cases that are asymptomatic, and it's just looking for those hosts that it can make really sick. We also know that we all know that there's individuals who are sick, but they don't want to go get tested because they know it can impact their family and their family would have to quarantine. So children from those families come to school and the spread just continues and continues. As of Sunday evening, our district had 12 positive COVID cases and 156 staff and students in quarantine. Some people are going to argue, hey, that's not that many more positive cases. And others, especially those who have become ill or are quarantined or have taken the virus home and it's spread to their family, might argue the other way. Regardless, we needed to have a resolution presented to you in hopes that we don't ever have to refer back to it because of legalities related to severe sickness or death caused by school exposure to our staff. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mr. Gary Brooks. He's a principal and public speaker from Kentucky, and he just shared a Facebook post this last weekend about the importance of looking through the lenses of other people. You board members, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Sprinkle, you've been contacted by people on all sides of this issue, begging you to do the right thing. Although the opinions on what the right thing is vary greatly, our administrators are stuck between a rock and a hard place trying to keep schools going while multiple staff and students are out sick or quarantined daily. Our school nurses, thank you, Brandy and Lacey, are working hard all day, nights and weekends, trying just to keep up with the number of cases and quarantines. The teachers are trying to keep their heads above water, teaching in person and remote. Families are worried because remote learning causes a real hardship for a lot of them. And our students are working at school or at home, trying to be resilient in environments that have a lot of unknowns at this time. This is just the school lens. Dr. Holmes and the medical personnel in our town are trying to make the same kind of hard decisions to keep people as safe as possible here in Abilene. So in closing, I encourage each and every one of us in this room, watching us on Facebook Live or just talking about it out in our community, to take a moment and look through the lens of others. Let's be in this together again and make our number one priority to keep each other as safe as possible. And I am happy to answer any questions that you have about the resolution that we submitted to you or anything else. But thanks for letting us come visit with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, you said you had 91 responses on that email. What was the total number?
The total number of responses?
No, the total number that was sent out. I was going to ask.
All certified. So we have about
All certified.
106 certified staff.
106, okay.
Yeah.
So we're
And I did
down
receive
to-
some because on the email, on the survey that was sent out, because we needed to verify that, I didn't send it in 6 times.
Right.
We did ask that they just put their name, not to put out there anywhere. But that really concerned a lot of people. They didn't want their name associated with their thoughts or their opinions. So I know that prevented a few people. And we also had a really quick turnaround. It was like within a day. So there were some people that, contacted me the next day and said, hey, I wasn't able to get it in. So unfortunately, that's why they didn't have the whole number, but
Right.
maybe one of our 106 is that what you said?
106, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to say, I 100% agree with you, especially when you say about looking at the lens. I think staff, parents, public members, I've had a lot of calls, texts, and emails from people in various positions. I've had people talking at meetings about the school board and about teachers and about students. And not talking to them, but talking at them or about them. And that's been on Facebook, in meetings, in emails. with each other, and I think we need to do a lot more talking with each other and not at each other, and not presuming that decisions emanate from anyone's side based off of an immoral agenda or, you know, coming from places that you might not agree with, not meaning you because you haven't done anything, but I've had a lot of emails about who we listen to, and people have gotten downright rude. And I'm sure you guys have gotten it too. And so keeping that in mind, I appreciate that you brought that up. And I'll speak for myself about the resolution. I think it would be irresponsible to send our most communicative and mobile body of students home. Because I don't know what anybody else experienced, but my child stayed home for the first 4 months. We didn't let her have play dates with her friends. But every time we walked around the neighborhood, kids were hanging out with kids. So I know that's what happens. And I believe that, I think Jeff said it last time, I might be wrong, it might not have been you, but some of the kids that are following the rules are the ones that are kind of left in the lurch because they're trying. But I 100% believe that if we send our oldest students home, that that's what they're going to be doing. And I'm not guessing at that. I know that because that's what we saw. And I think it would be irresponsible to do that to the community or to teachers. If we send them home and their numbers jump because they are socializing, when can we get those kids that are doing the right thing back to school? And like I said, I'm not guessing at that. I know that that's what happens. So personally, that's where a lot of my decisions come from actually seeing what happened during the spring when our numbers weren't that large and people should have been a little more cautious because we had no clue what COVID was. And now people are getting a little more hip and a little less afraid to the virus and the effects on youth. So I feel like students especially would be a lot less afraid because what do they have to lose? They're already at home. They're already out of school. They're already taken away from all their extracurricular activities. And for those oldest students who would be going to college, and they're losing out on everything that they wanted the end of their year to be like, we'd be making this second year worth of students kind of go through that. So it wasn't I forget the words that were used in the original email, but we weren't disregarding anything. We were just taking several things into regard.
And I would like the teachers to know that I understand firsthand how hard they're working because my wife's a teacher. So the typical night in a Bathurst household this fall was I get home from the Hartsfield about 8:39. Charity might be coming home from school about that time. And she gets home and she works on lesson plans. And she's probably going to bed about 10:30, 11:30 at night. And so I understand the difficulty of trying to get kids set up on Zoom because you have new kids in Zoom and then you have kids that you got to come up with a different lesson plan or a different way for them to be able to do school from home. And so I understand the stress that the teachers are being put under with this year. And so I just want the teachers to know that they're appreciated and that we understand this has been a very difficult year for everybody, for parents, kids, for teachers.
And I would add, thank you to you guys for your leadership because obviously we do need to hear from our staff. We do need to hear from our teachers. I think we're a very collaborative district. We have in the past. Unfortunately, with COVID, things happen so quickly and things change at a moment's notice and it's extremely fluid. I'd never envisioned spending as much time with Mr. Brown as I have the last year, and I'm sorry for what you have to deal with. But it is a daily phone call, a daily meeting, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. And like Veronica said, we look at this through so many lenses because we have parents calling, we have business owners calling, say, I've got kids in my office on Zoom, and they're being very graceful to let that happen. You know, we do have to look at the county health and the direction that we get from Dr. Holmes, from Mr. Holtgren, from our county commissioners. It's a lot of information, and I want to say this to make sure everybody understands. There are going to be times when we make a decision, most times when we make a decision, there's not a good one that most people are going to agree on. And if we make a decision that people disagree with, I hope that they understand that us making a decision that is not what they want doesn't mean we don't support them. Just because we don't always agree doesn't mean we don't support. So again, thank you for what you guys have done. I think that when Mr. Brown was down, I want to shout out to Dana because I think she led our DLT team. And, you know, I know that we're trying to work in a form of continuous improvement. Look, we talked about it with Brandy. We used to have 20 kids for every quarantine. Now we're down to 9 or 10. You know, we have to continue to work together to get better and hopefully see a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for what you're doing. It is heard. Unfortunately, it's not always the decision we have to land with, but hopefully we can all work together to make the second semester better than the first and moving forward as well.
Yeah, and we are very grateful that the DLT has been able to meet and to get some changes made. And a wise woman that I know refers to people who loudly complain as the squeaky wheels. And for the majority of teachers, we're there for our kids. We're there because we care about them and love them. And you know what? I have 1 out of my 18 kids that's a remote learner, but I'm not going to leave that remote learner. You know, that's why, your wife is there working long hours because she's not going to leave anyone behind. She wants to make sure that all their needs are being met, and that just means a lot more time. So we do appreciate that you're being heard. We appreciate all the work that you're doing. We really encourage that open communication. I know we really appreciated the message from Greg, just, following up and saying, so I think that would really be beneficial to our teachers as we move forward, that just keeping everyone informed and on the same page so we can work together as a team. I think would be great.
Go ahead.
That is something that, as a superintendent, I did not do a very good job of during this last semester, and that's part of a growing curve for me, I believe. But I believe we do have some things kind of set up in terms of this is how we're going to routinely do business moving forward that will help alleviate some of that feeling of distance that you obviously have been feeling. Otherwise, I don't think the resolution would have been needed. And I do apologize for that. We'll do a better job moving forward. But I echo what's been said. I appreciate your all leadership in this as well.
I'm going to say something. Go ahead, and then Chris, were you going to
I
say?
already forgot what I was going to say.
Okay.
No, I just want to say that I appreciate all the teachers, and I see through your eyes, because I deal with it at work. I can't run a grocery store if my people are sick. So we can't run a school district if our teachers aren't healthy, if our teachers aren't happy. So I think that, yes, being more open and everybody communicating together, nobody's in the dark. I think that will help tremendously. And, I'm always going to stick up, or I'll fight for you. So, keep up the good work and stay healthy.
Back when we did a survey in November, and all the staff were able to make comments, and I read through every single one of them.
Sure.
And the one that stuck out the most says, "I can't continue at this level. I cannot be all things to all people." And out of all of those, that was the one that just kept sticking with me, because I feel like our staff has been phenomenal. Prior to pandemic, we were everything to so many of those kids. I mean, we weren't just their teacher. You guys put your heart and souls into those kids, and you were such a huge part of their lives that now when this came about, we had to be even more and do even more. And I absolutely understand the stress that you guys are under, because you still want to continue to care for those kids just like you did. But there's so much more to your job description now, and ways to get to those kids. I understand where you're coming from, and I know you still want to be all the things to all those kids. So it's just, I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I know how hard you work. I have 4 in my family, 2 sisters, sister-in-law, brother-in-law. They are all teachers, and I talk to them and hear them, and we know what's going on in their different parts of the state. So I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. I appreciate taking the time to do an additional survey, maybe ask questions that we didn't ask. So I just, thank you.
Well, thank you all. I really think that the staff of Abilene just needed some positive vibes, just like everyone else. So it's just look through other people's lenses, and we'll work together and we'll get through this, because we're Abilene and we stick together. So.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on, do you have some stuff for us then?
Yes, we've got a good number of things that we are going to recommend administratively this evening. We're asking our administrative team to each kind of share individually some aspects of support, tangible support that we are offering the Board of Education to consider and to look at as items to be approved once we are finished. To start with, we're understanding teachers need more time, and we have spent some time visiting with the district leadership team to get some ideas. I have Mindy Sanders. I'm going to get you in here to speak a little bit about our calendar alterations and how we hope to provide teachers some time.
Yeah, okay, so we met with DLT, and one of the things that as principals, and I think some of you, if you read those comments, you saw that in the comments from the teachers and staff as well, that the thing that we can do that will alleviate a lot of pressure is give time. And we all know that time is a commodity. We don't have a lot of time. We always want more time. That's the way we are. However, we think we've come up with a plan that will be beneficial for families and for students and for our teachers, that will provide them some release time to do lesson prep. One of the things I want y'all to understand that aren't teachers is that in our world, we talk a lot about curriculum development. So you might be developing a plan for insurance, or you might be developing a plan for your store routes and how you're going to put people out on the floor and what they're going to do there. The same thing works for teachers as we plan and develop a curriculum. And so in this first semester, what our teachers have done, and Jeff, your wife is one of them, what they have done is they have developed double curriculum. And that usually takes, just for your point of reference, typically we take 5 to 7 years on a curriculum cycle when you're building your own curriculum. Just FYI, I've done it many times. It is not easy. So we have asked our whole state, our whole country has asked teachers to do that in the blink of an eye. So what we are talking about is taking 5 days for second semester, 1 full day a month. We looked at multiple options. We looked at Wednesdays, we looked at Fridays, we looked at what would be best for our teachers, what would be best for our students. Obviously, we don't leave any rock unturned when we visit one another. So what we are proposing is that we would have January 15th, February 10th, March 24th, April 21st, and May 5th. As release days, that would mean students in K5, PK5 would not come to school. And 612 students, we offered a little bit different scenario. We talked to our friends in the 612 world, and they said, really honestly, we just need a half day. They needed a half day because they want more time with kids in and doing the stuff in the classroom, like for CTE, like for well-being class. They need to be in there doing that work, but they do need some release time to plan. For the elementary world, we need more time to build curriculum, to record videos, to put things together so kids can do that online, to do fluency probes online. I can't even tell you the weirdness that comes with fluency stuff. So it just takes time. So what we are proposing is that we have 5 additional days. Teachers will be working on videos, curriculum, writing curriculum, putting together assessments. Each building will work with that a little bit differently. That may look differently at McKinley than it might look at the high school. At my building, my teacher is going to be spending the entire 8 hours, which will probably actually be 10 hours because they'll come early and they'll stay late because that's what you do on days like that. They will come in and they will 100% record videos the entire time for Seesaw. That's the platform we're using. And so that is what we think would be beneficial to our kiddos. We did talk a little bit to Dana about the possibility of doing some meals on those days so that we can make sure that kids are fed. And those days that we looked at are on Wednesdays. So we think that would be the most beneficial for our district. Fridays, we run into some release time for sports, for different kinds of things that people are going to. So we just have a lot of things that are happening on that Friday. So we didn't think we'd get the most benefit for that actual time of what we need to develop curriculum. So we think Wednesdays would be the best day for that. So.
In the extra time that we built in, like the extra, we don't have to like cut any spring break or like, we have plenty of time.
Yeah. Just for you, I'm cutting all your spring break. You and Chris.
I never go anywhere anyway, it's fine.
Yeah. You know
Sorry,
where I'll
no
be.
spring break for you.
Vacation pay for us?
Greg did
I did outline the calendar and just went back and have, because we did build in some extra time with our 20 minutes at the end of
Right.
the day. That essentially gives us 8 days of flexibility if we run into some snow dates and things like that. If we do end up with some really intense snowstorms for some reason at just the wrong time, we might alter a little bit of, one of these days might not happen.
Right, okay.
If, say, we get a snow day on the 14th of January or something, and although that's still early enough, I think we've got more than enough flexibility. Even though we're providing a full day of release time for pre-K 5, we still get half of that time back because it's considered professional development. So I really think we've got plenty of flexibility there.
There really is a solution that really, I think, I heard one of our teachers say that it really just makes them feel valued. I think that's maybe the piece we're missing around here, is that we just want to make sure that people know that we know that you have done, everybody in the country has done a whole year's work in half a year. And that's what our teachers have done. So this feeling we're getting is the May feeling. If you've ever felt the May feeling where you're like, I'm ready for the sun and I just want to be in the summer, like Olaf, but that's what we're all feeling, and it's December, and we're just starting the winter season. So we think that these 5 days will benefit teachers greatly, and they'll be able to get a lot of work done. So
So we build in 8 days and we're only gonna lose 2.5 then by giving up 5 days, right? So
that's quick math.
we still have,
That's about,
Phasing the problem.
That was very.
the question
Yeah, I'm
did, the question did come up as the administrative team worked through the details of this last Friday morning. What about the possibility of getting back to our 3 o'clock dismissal time? Because this 20 extra minutes has squeezed a lot of folks as well in the entire community. If we can get through winter, essentially the third 9 weeks, and not have a great deal of snow days, then we're going to come to you all about when it's appropriate and talk about perhaps shifting our day back to a 3 o'clock dismissal, part of the old days that we're missing. So,
Well, and with the fluidity of this year, I don't think that's going to be too much to ask, assuming we get through the winter unscathed.
it is supposed to snow tomorrow, by the way.
I know Colt was going to call you. I told you that.
What questions do you have about the learning time? Rob, Chris, anybody got any
I have
questions?
no questions. I think it's great.
I do too.
I mean, we need to support you guys. Like I said, 100%. Without you guys, you don't have a school district.
So it's
So
good to hear that. Thanks,
Yeah,
Chris.
yeah.
We really appreciate that. And I will speak on behalf of our teachers, how's that?
But I want to make sure that Jade is at work during those hours and she's not out.
She'll probably be at West shopping.
Oh, well, then that's fine.
See, actually, I thought she went to Zai's.
That's fine too. That's fine too.
How often do you usually have those DLT meetings? Have you had those?
We haven't been able to get together this year. It's just
Okay.
been really rough. Last year when we had COVID, we met faithfully almost every single week as a COVID DLT. That's what we titled ourselves. And so that had been really great. But I will be honest, as an administrator, even my building level team hadn't been getting together. We've just been, I think there's somebody out there that says ready, shoot, aim. Have you ever heard that? Like you just went and you like shot for it and then you were like, wait, I need to aim a little bit back here. I feel like that's sort of how we've run this semester. We've put the horse behind the cart. I don't know, whatever phrase you want to put to it. So I will say that as an admin team, we met in early November and said, we've got to get our teachers back in here. We're just feeling like they're not a part of this equation, and that makes us not feel whole. And then sicknesses happened, and then we couldn't get together, and so we were able to get together now. Now we have a plan to meet at least monthly, so that we can run things by people. And I'll be really honest, we don't always agree, just like in here, we don't always agree with what we're going to do and what days are the best or what's happening, but it is really good to just put everybody on the same page and be able to say, we just need to talk about it. At least it gives us a standing point for our admin meetings to say, okay, here's what this teacher is saying, here's what these teachers are saying, this is what this building is saying, and then we can make a decision that may not be perfect for everybody, but it's at least a little bit for somebody. So, but we think these 5 days will be really helpful.
I'm glad to hear that, Minnie, what you just said though too, because when we did our survey, as Jennifer said, I mean, there was comments and they were all across the board. I mean, there was strong feelings both ways and I mean, you'd read one thing and then the next one was the exact opposite. And these are coming from teachers, so it's hard to get that united voice and feel like we know what we need to do. But one thing that bothered me though was there were several teachers that made comments saying that they were not involved in any of this at all. And as a board, I'm making assumptions and that's always wrong, but I just assumed that they were having a voice within their own building, but maybe that explains some of it. It's just such a wreck this year.
And I would say that as our
can't be as
buildings,
intentional as you want
I think
to.
our buildings were spot on. Like I know Ben knows his teachers like the back of his hand. I know Jenna knows her teachers like the back of her hand. Like I Twyla, Ethan, I mean, we all know our teachers really well, but collectively we were maybe having that collective voice, and that's the piece we missed. That was our bad, you know, that everybody makes mistakes, and I just think collectively we weren't advocating together as a group and putting it all together in one big picture, and so I think that's where that just made everything not maybe even out like we wanted it to, so.
So now there's an effort to be intentional about that happening.
Absolutely.
And
I would say that the effort was we always wanted to do that, but then you're right, we just didn't make that happen. So I think it feels better to me that we're meeting.
Perfect.
I think this is great. Although I will say, I heard from one teacher in an email last week that they weren't thinking at all about using any time off. I think this is a good way to alleviate some time that they're spending over and above and beyond what they're doing in the class, but that they're afraid to take time off because, you know, everything is kind of in such a fragile state that you don't want to leave your kids, you don't want to leave your classroom.
Nobody does.
And I think if we probably looked at the time off that teachers are taking, they're not really taking their time off. And if I had seen that teachers weren't taking their time off, I probably would have assumed that it's because they're saving it in case they get quarantined or they get COVID. But it had never dawned on me that nobody was taking time off because they're afraid.
Teachers are angels. I'll just be really honest. Teachers are legitimately angels. And it's always interesting when we come to meetings and we hear people say, well, didn't you consider this? Or didn't you think of this? Or why didn't you think of this piece? Or why didn't you? And I'm going, oh my God, we thought about that 65 times and we woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning and texted Mindy about it. So it really happened. So yeah, teachers they just don't want to leave. They are in it. They are in it for these kids and they are in it whole bodies. Mm-hmm. I surveyed my staff right around Thanksgiving. I just said, can you take the last 2 weeks and just even the weeks before Thanksgiving, which typically are weeks that you are finishing up stuff, you're wrapping things up, you're finishing that piece of that unit that you've been working on, so you're kind of coming down the downhill slide. And I said, just give me the numbers because I want to be able to advocate. I am telling you what, I had probably 7 people turn them in, and at least 25 to 30 hours extra a week. And the thing that was killing me was that they were saying, Mindy, I'm not spending time with my babies. I'm not spending time with my family. I am not doing anything other than work. Grading on Seesaw, assigning on Seesaw, helping parents get on Seesaw, helping grandparents get on Seesaw, helping everybody work through this. They are the tech leads. They are the first line of defense we have for our community. And so that's what's so important to be able to, when they say to us, oh my God, pressure, 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 how can we relieve? Because yeah, they're just totally in it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Okay, another place for support is with our full-time remote learning. We're going to try to make some adjustments there for our 6th through 12th grade students. I'm going to have Ben and Jenna describe a little bit of what those changes will look like. And they're with us virtually, is that right?
Are we on the screen?
I am getting to that point. I had to
Okay.
turn this around from Mindy's presentation and you are now live.
All righty. Well, I'll begin and just kind of tell you how we came about this suggestion, and then I'll talk a little bit about middle school, and then we'll finish up talking about high school and kind of overall. One of the things that we knew we needed to do was to try to eliminate that concept for teachers of having to Zoom and teach in person all at the same time as much as possible. Our teachers also, many of them are making instructional videos for our full-time remote learners as well as our quarantine learners. And so originally our idea was to say no more full-time remote through USD 435. The part that tug at our administrator, educator heartstrings is sending our kids outside of the district to find virtual options for those full-time remote learners. And remember, there's 2 separate groups. There's kids who have chosen and their parents to be remote from the very beginning of the year. And then there are kids who quarantine in and out. So right now at the middle school, I have several families who have decided to be remote between Thanksgiving and Christmas because they didn't want to take the chance of having kids quarantined over Christmas. So we're not talking about those learners. We're talking about the ones who are just full-time remote learning since the beginning of the year. But we also really want to maximize the learning potential. I believe that's a Ben Smith term. Maybe I got it a little bit different, but in both settings, we want students to be able to learn the most effectively remotely that are full-time remote, and we want teachers to be able to focus on the students that are there with them in person in the classroom. And so we approached Brian Roth, who is in charge of our DCLE and our Abilene Virtual School, about the opportunity to add middle school students to AVS second semester and add more high school students who are our full-time remote learners currently. He was very open to the idea, and I actually just want to say thank you to Brian for being so open and so willing, because he's a classroom teacher as well as in charge of AVS. So he's kind of taking on a bunch of new students in his AVS role to help his peers in the classroom. So what this will look like, we have 20 full-time remote learners at the middle school, and I believe that they have about 15, is that correct, Dr. Smith, at the high school?
We're 20 right now.
Oh, 20, okay. So there's the possibility for 40 students to add to the virtual school second semester. Once we give this presentation to you and you guys kind of give us the A-OK on it, then Dr. Smith and I will begin making phone calls to those remote learning families tomorrow. They will have the option, if they so desire, to return face-to-face. They will have the option to go to Abilene Virtual School. If they don't want either of those options, they always have the option to homeschool or to find another virtual type of curriculum through other districts or through the state. But the first 2 options are to stay here in Abilene, either coming back face-to-face or switching over to AVS. In order to do that, we do need to add a few things. Number 1, we need to add 7 to 10 hours for Wyoming Snyder, because Brian is the only one who works with the AVS program. And those students use a program called Edgenuity. And so as they're learning virtually, when they get to a test, the high school students have to make an appointment and come in and sit with Mr. Roth to proctor their tests. The middle school students, we will not require them because of lack of transportation to do that. we will actually ask parents to sign off and be the proctors for those tests to ensure that the students have not utilized other resources. So Wyoming's assistance will be necessary so that we can provide some afternoon and weekend hours for the additional 20 students in the high school level who would need to come proctor in person. Also, she will be able to unlock tests via the internet on evening hours and weekend hours. So middle school students, if they have a test that they need to have open so their parents can proctor and they want to do it after their parents get home in the evening, then she would be there to do the unlocking for them, or also on the weekend. So that is one additional piece that we need to add. In addition to that, we also need to add more site licenses for Edgenuity. We're still working through the numbers, and I know Dana has been very helpful with that. We have full-time site licenses right now at the number of 40. And so we will have to purchase some additional full-time site licenses in order to make this happen. We will send a letter from the district level office just kind of explaining all of this information. We also have a contract that we've kind of drafted for the middle school because of the fact that the parents will be proctoring. And then we might do something kind of like that for the high school. Typically, when we move people to AVS at the high school level, Brian just has a personal conversation with the family. So we just want to make sure that all of these families understand what is expected. Ben, take it on over.
Really what we're prepared to offer the most is core classes at both the middle school and the high school. At the high school, we need a little bit of freedom to offer math just a little bit differently. Math tends to be a little bit more difficult when you take that support away. So in talking with the math teachers, they want to provide that math instruction a little bit differently. So we also wanted to make available the chance to come to school for an elective if students wanted to. And we're hopeful that families that are fearful of contracting or maybe exposing a loved one at home to an illness would feel that that is mitigated by up to 75% if a student only comes to school for one class period. And depending on where that class is, we can even let them in the closest door and they can leave, not have to travel through the school building in order to get there. So we're hopeful that some will take advantage of that. But for the most part, we're looking at providing those core classes through Edgenuity. Will not interfere with the students' ability to graduate. We have 32 credits that are available from the day that the freshman year starts until high school ends, with 26 and a half credits being required. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in there that if a student takes next semester, if they take 4 or 5 classes instead of 8, that will not limit them in their ability to graduate. So like Jenna was saying, we really want to maximize that learning efficiency in dual platforms. And what we have not been able to do, despite our best efforts, is feel like we're getting that bang for our buck in the classroom and for our remote learners at the same time. And we are really wearing out our teachers and trying to get that sort of effectiveness that through no fault of their own, we're not able to get. It's just, we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. And it's turned out to be not an impossible task, but an extremely strenuous and difficult one. So we felt this was the best way to go. We'd still be able to maintain that promise that we made about being able to stay remote. It's just that remote is going to be offered through virtual school, not through Zoom. So that's where we would like to go with this whole plan.
Quick question, Jenna and Ben. Someone who's currently remote, when we offer them virtual and they say, yes, I'm going to take it. Currently, remote can effectively bounce in and out, if I understand that correctly. You know, hey, we don't want to go between Thanksgiving and Christmas because we want to be able to go see grandma and grandpa or whatever, and so we flip them over to remote. When we go to a virtual platform, they're virtual for a semester. Am I saying that correctly?
That is absolutely correct. And the reason is because Edgenuity, while it addresses the same standards that we teach, it is a different curriculum. And so a student cannot pop in and out of Edgenuity. It would be for an entire semester.
And let's say that a student wants to participate in band still. The risk reward is there for them, and they say, yes, we still want to do band. We're still going to allow them to be part of that class and maybe pep band if they decide that's what they want to do. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We encourage, historically, virtual students take at least one elective class in the building. Part of that is because being around their peers is a good thing, but also because we don't have enough of a robust elective offering within the virtual program, so they can pick some of those up at school. We felt that if a student wanted to go into, that making the shift to virtual school, that we'd still make it available to them to come to an elective class. If they want to do band, if they want to do choir, they want to come to school to do welding or a culinary class, then absolutely we would allow them to do so.
Thank you.
I guess I was confused. I didn't think we were allowing kids to just go remote for a week or two. I thought Ben had sent out an email saying, maybe not, I could be. I was trying to go back and find it, but I thought we were allowing.
I think when we first started, the initial thought was that there was that, but we obviously understood that as this thing has been so fluid, I think that changed early in the semester. Am I right, Ben?
Yeah, I sent the email out really encouraging students and parents to not feel like remote was a temporary option just because they weren't feeling good for that day. In other words, if you're homesick, stay home and get better. Don't worry about zooming in.
Right.
But the second part of that was if you're home and you're just attempt to zoom in, some of those teachers may not even know that you're trying. So let's not put that on them because we were seeing in a few small cases that, oh, I didn't wake up in time, so I'm just going to Zoom to class. And so we wanted to take that option away.
Right.
So if we put a kid in remote, then that was the only way they were going to be able to Zoom in.
And that will continue because we will basically with this option, we will be saying the only time that students can be considered remote learners, or what we're changing it at the middle school, and I believe everywhere else to a quarantined learner, is if they're officially in quarantine. So I do anticipate, because I did have several families at the middle school who chose to remain remote between Thanksgiving and Christmas because of the concern. That is not going to be an option second semester. They're either going to be on Edgenuity from the beginning of the semester, or they're going to be expected to be in school.
Okay.
And it's impossible to jump back and forth between what students are doing in the classroom and what they're going to be doing in Edgenuity. Edgenuity is self-paced. It's open 24/7, so a student could choose to work from 8 to 3 on their own if they wanted to. Take a 3-hour nap, get up at 7 o'clock, keep working for another 4 hours. They're not limited by time or space. Not sound too Star Trek-y. But
if they wanted to get done a month in advance of the end of the school year, if they're working their tails off, they can do it.
Yeah. There's also a unique opportunity that if students did not pass a class in the first or the second 9 weeks in their core classes, that we could reoffer that to them and they could actually do some credit recovery within the same methodology that they're doing their regular credit accrual.
And all the same requirements for participation in extracurriculars would stay the same. So they would have to have the same grades, everything.
Yes.
No.
Yep. And according to Keisha's policy, they have to pass 5 classes. So that would be at the bare minimum.
Right.
And now if they're behind, like you said, they worked at their own pace. So if they're there's really no behind in classes, right?
Right. The way that Edgenuity works is you have a progress bar when you first open up your Edgenuity screen as a student. And so it shows, 0 to 100%. Every day it goes up in how much you should have accomplished. And typically it depends on the semester, but sometimes it goes up 3% per day. So a student on any given day has 2 different possible grades that we can look at. One, their percent of completion. So if a student today might need to be at 78%, but they're at 67%, then that tells us they're a little bit behind. So they would be in the blue or in the red potentially, depending on blue is they're on track, red is they're behind. But they also will have a grade. So they have to pass with at least a 60% or higher every single activity in order to go on to the next one. It won't even open for them unless they pass that activity. And so you can also do a grade letter or a percentage grade any given day, depending on the work that they have accomplished so far. So as long as a student finishes these courses by May 25th, which is the very, very last day, they will have passed because you have to pass in order to go on.
But is that something Will's going to have to look at?
Will's raising his hand. Somebody call on Will. Somebody call on Will.
Mr. Burton, please.
Mr. Burton.
I think to answer your question, by CASHA standards, a student that is a virtual student has to be enrolled in one on-campus class at least in order to have eligibility to participate in extracurricular activities.
Yeah, but so if they are in an activity, are you gonna have to go in there and make sure that they're at that correct percentage of completion of their course before they'll be allowed to participate? Is that gonna fall on you, or whose job is that gonna be?
Mr. Roth is the one who manages those grades on a daily basis.
Right. Just like we run our eligibility reports bi-weekly at the high school on full-time students there, we get reports on those students from Mr. Roth.
Okay.
Also.
Okay.
On where their progress is in their classes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I just want, if this is gonna be open 24 hours a day, does that mean Mr. Roth's gonna have to be monitoring this 24 hours a day? I hope.
No. He has office hours during the day, and then he also teaches a class at the middle school. So his students know what his office hours are. And then Wyoming will have her additional office hours. And so the students really only need to access them if they need a quiz or a test unlocked, or if they have a specific question.
I was just hoping he was listening.
I'm sure he is.
Okay.
Chris, I think a 20-hour day is fair for Brian, if not 24. That's just pushing it.
Do you anticipate lots of families moving to this option? Like, what if, I know you said we had to buy 10 or so additional licenses. You know, do you anticipate it maybe being 20? Like, do you think people are really going to respond to that?
There are potentially 40 students that would move over, 20 middle school and 20 high school. And honestly, from the list that I have, I anticipate the vast majority of them moving to AVS. The families that are staunchly about full remote at this time, they are concerned about health, and they have very specific health concerns. And so I don't think that they will come back face to face. And when the other option to go outside of our district is the same thing that we're offering at AVS, I think they'll take it. I'm not sure, Dr. Smith, how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think there's a small handful that will come back to school. So when Jenna put the number 15 out earlier, that's from a previous conversation we had where I think that from the 20 families right now, that there's a good chance that maybe 5 of them come back to school. But for those who are, like Mrs. DeLay said, those that are concerned about health reasons will latch onto this, and I think they'll do very well with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
The next piece of teacher support that we have would be providing additional adults to manage the quarantine students, the remote learners, what we've come to know as remote learners, but quarantine specialists, remote specialists. That will look unique in each one of our buildings, so I'm going to ask that the building principals, we'll start with Twyla, and just move our way up a little bit to share a little bit of what they anticipate, or perhaps what they have visited with their teams about already in their buildings with regard to using these kinds of folks. So Twyla, I'm going to let you be the first one up, I believe.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I just want to share that our teachers feel very passionate at Kennedy, and I'm sure just like all of our other buildings, that we need to maintain the relationships we've built with our students, the positive rapport with the families, and the communication that has been established with families. So at the pre-K 1 level, our teachers would like to still maintain their remote learners doing the Zoom meetings and checking their assignments on Seesaw, seeing their progress, giving them meaningful feedback on assignments if they need to complete something else. And the teachers would like the time for someone else to come in and potentially cover their class for maybe an hour a day, once a week, maybe an hour and a half. We haven't figured out a schedule exactly, but those are some things we are tossing around. So if I have, someone here that has flexibility in their schedule, they can pop in and sub for a little bit, allowing one of my teachers to take an hour to look at the Seesaw assignments, to assign Seesaw assignments to students and things like that. That just relieves a big burden off of them. And that's what Ms. Sanders was talking about. When the teachers are staying late or they're working on the weekends, they are grading these assignments and giving feedback to students. So it's very important that they have this time. So those are some of the things we are looking at Kennedy. And Ms. Sanders and I had a brief discussion, just throwing some ideas out about maybe finding someone that can cover Kennedy in the morning for helping the teachers here and McKinley in the afternoon. But we will continue to discuss at our collaboration this Wednesday with our kindergarten and first grade teams. And then we will continue right after break as well to try to finalize a schedule and see what would be the best fit for our building.
At McKinley, we are looking at all of those things as well. We have also started using some aids to help us out with that. Typically, we use our aides in small group for our MTSS groups, but right now, per the Dickinson County Health Department guidelines, we cannot obviously meet in mixed groups all over the building. That would be not within the, that would be not helping to stop the virus. So, so we are using our aides in our classroom to help individual and groups of students in our classroom. But Jaden Walters and Marie Ebersol are also, we've been a little creative with that in Seesaw. So they've been helping us on the back end there. And then we are working to try to either hire somebody certified if we can get that, or some classified support to help us give some release time for teachers. We're also looking at giving one of our classroom teachers a little bit of release time. At the end of the day, we think we have that figured out with our already full-time sub, so that they can, one of the things that takes a long time is assigning assignments, just getting them out there to the kids. And so we're looking at that sort of piece as well, trying to not disrupt the day, but giving the release time for teachers in the most economical but helpful way possible for our teachers to be able to have some time to be able to get stuff done. So, and like Twyla said, keeping our relationships intact with our students. So, Jenna.
I'm actually going to go throw it to Ethan, and then I'll come back to me.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ethan.
Eisenhower, we're the forgotten child, I think. Well, we've been fortunate, Eisenhower. We have had quite a bit of time just to kind of play with this remote specialist or quarantine specialist, just because we had some staff that were out quarantined for extended periods of time. At one point, I had about 50% of my fifth grade class out on quarantine. And so Mrs. Ward, as well as some paras, really took care of that group of kids. In fifth grade, we've had the opportunity to have Mr. Brown become our quarantine specialist, and has done a very nice job of facilitating that group of students. And what they've decided in fifth grade at this point is to have those kids still come live into their class time, where they can hear the teacher instruction. Mr. Brown facilitates any questions they have and then just helps them get through the curriculum. The other aspect that Mr. Brown's able to do is really stay on top of the kids with getting assignments done, helping troubleshoot technology and things like that. So I think that's worked really nicely. In fourth grade, we've taken a little bit of different perspective. I have a young fourth grade staff. I've got two teachers that are going to be going on maternity leave this spring. And one of those teachers was out on quarantine quite a bit, Mrs. Milliken. So while she was out, we had a much smaller group of kids doing remote. And so she facilitated that with some para support. But now that she's back, Mrs. Reardon is doing that. So basically what we've done is that fourth grade class is a much smaller class. So we've combined the 5 homerooms into 4 homerooms, and then are facilitating. We have one teacher then that facilitates the remote kids. I would agree with what you've heard so far with regards to communication, relationship building, and things like that. So it takes a really dynamic person to be able to do that. So Jenna, you're up.
Thank you. Now I'll take it. At AMS, each of our grade levels has sort of a little bit different way of handling the remote learners or the quarantine learners currently. And that's been working really well. But additionally, on top of moving our remote learners to AVS, I really want to make sure that we are able to maximize all of the different environments for students. And so actually, just as of today, Janelle Reedy, who is a retired teacher from AMS and who has subbed for us for the last 2 years, she has agreed to be our quarantine specialist. She's very familiar with Canvas and with PowerSchool. And she had several really good questions. She's actually going to do it remotely. She has not been comfortable subbing because of health concerns. So this was actually a perfect kind of arrangement with her. So I'm very excited about the fact that she will be able to be our go-to for anybody who goes on quarantine. And she will be able to communicate with the teachers and the students. And instead of having the students only be able to Zoom with their teaching team one time a day, to ask questions or to prepare for the day, she will be able to do, she's actually planning to do 6 Zooms a day, 2 with each grade level, 1 in the morning to explain and get, some sample questions and lessons kind of in there, and then again in the afternoon to kind of see what their progress is and to help monitor them. And so I'm really excited about what she's going to bring to the table. And I think it will help relieve some additional stress on our teachers. Dr. Smith.
Great stuff.
We have a different set of needs at the high school than the other schools do. And so we've been tossing around the idea of maybe adding a quarantine specialist for each of our 4 core areas. The math department, especially Mr. Cook, has done some really strong work in developing an idea of what that might look like. I wouldn't be able to do it a whole lot of justice to try to explain it, but he's got a fairly refined idea. And we're actually going to meet with some other core department heads on Wednesday after school, just to try to, again, refine what that's going to look like. We may have departments who are okay handle it on their own. We may have some who just need to need someone to check in with their kids. And so at the most we'd like to have 4, but it might be that 2 or 3 is actually what would help us out quite a bit. But the quarantine specialist at the high school will be a combination of someone who can help a student get through material. There's a former yet current math teacher who we'd like to talk to about it, who's I think has expressed some interest in at least thinking about it. And so it would be helpful in math specific content. But for others, just checking in and making sure that they're staying up to speed on their assignments, checking in for some mental health stuff just to make sure that student's connected. The departments felt that was important as well. So what that ultimately looks like yet, we don't quite know. But like I said, we've got a meeting on Wednesday to try to refine that and add some more details as we go.
Okay.
I guess my biggest question is to find those individuals that were qualified to do that. But like Jenna said, she knew someone, and I think that is amazing. It's just trying to find someone qualified in that short of time. And if they can do it remote, maybe there'll be a bigger pool to pick from.
Yeah.
Obviously it won't work for all the schools. I don't know.
And we're kind of inventing this piece of the wheel as we're going. It does have to be a good fit. It has to be somebody that is actually relieving the teachers of some responsibility, not just a body thrown into a position. So I think our administrators have done a good job of already starting to filter through some of those strong possibilities. I've received several names from them already. Looking forward to, even as early as this week, trying to hone that in as to what that would look like. That would also entail, what's the compensation look like? What do the hours look like? How do we record those hours? Somebody that's in the building all day, every day, that's easy. If it's somebody that's going to do some things remotely, and you heard that description there, we need to kind of outline what the expectations are for those specific people. But again, the bottom line is these positions have to relieve some of the pressure that our teachers have been feeling. So.
And how many days, like for Kennedy and McKinley? Oh, that's the cost between the 2 of them.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, at the absolute most, if we were to hire everybody in these positions, it would appear that we could spend somewhere around that $105,000 mark to get this covered.
Does that have any CARES or Spark, any extra COVID money to cover that, or is that all?
I think we've kind of used most of it already, so.
Is this Monday through Friday, or is this just 1 day a week that this person's there? Is it?
That's dependent upon what's needed at each of the buildings.
And that dollar amount can fluctuate.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, not everybody will be paid the same. Those who are working the same would be paid the same.
Well, and when it comes down to the monetary side of it, obviously we can't spend it if you don't have it, but we have to, I still think that at this point we have to do everything we can because it's been such a trying year. So if it ends up being that much extra money and we can make it work, sorry, Warden, you gotta you gotta write the check. So,
We can find that money.
Yeah, I don't have any doubts that we can't find the money. I just didn't know if there were extra funds or grants or anything left over that we could.
In August, we talked about what the possibilities could be in terms of something crazy happening at the state level with school funding. I think we're going to bypass that. It's not going to be an issue. But we talked about our contingency fund. I hate to see us dip into that, but because we've just now kind of gotten it to where we feel pretty good about that level. But that's something we can rebuild after this next semester. But our contingency can help us with the added expenses of all these issues that we're talking about.
One of the biggest problems my wife's had, and I've heard from several teachers, is getting students to do the work online. And I could see, even if they're not quarantined, if we could have, I mean, when we go remote, if these people could help students follow up with.
Right.
one question about the money again, would this cause us to need to republish our budget at all, or, okay?
No. And if we did start dipping into the contingency, that comes to you as a school board to approve. We can't just arbitrarily pull that out and go with it. It's called saving for a rainy day. And so we would have to describe to you what that rain looks like, and then go from there.
And Jeff, I'd like to share very quickly, we do have some additional ideas. Shelley Alderson shared some ideas for the social emotional learning side. Those items will still be going out to the DLT team so that we can discuss some of those options as well. And some of that would be the follow-up and checking in for those students that haven't been engaged, aren't completing assignments. How do we alleviate some of that check-in that teachers have been having to do to this point? So there's some more ideas coming. We've just been working very hard to get these started.
Okay. Anything else on our quarantine specialists, remote/quarantine specialists? Okay. There are a couple of other little things that have kind of come up. I say little things, or things that have grabbed people's attention in recent weeks, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to explain some of these guidelines in this format for the general public. So the first thing is with our recent CASHA guidelines for spectators. So I think we've got, these guys are in the building, so they're gonna come on in, or mask up and come on in. So Derek and Will are gonna explain a little bit about what's going on with CASHA.
Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you for not amending your agenda 5,000 times through this process. For you that have been watching the CASHA meetings, that's happened a lot. So I'm going to give an introduction of what we've gone through over the last couple of weeks, and then let Mr. Burns and talk about middle school adjustments, and I'll bring it back to the high school after that. But on November 21st, the Board of Directors for the Activities Association heard and took action based on recommendations from their executive board. The executive board recommended creating a 5-day moratorium for no practice and no interscholastic competitions from December 1st through January 14th. Because numbers across the state were high, the medical community in the state was in alarm over overtaxing healthcare systems that were already overburdened. Thanksgiving break, winter break coming up, chances for much more rapid and expanded spread. They were going to allow for practices to be held because those would be local. And then they were going to make recommendations for limiting the number of competition. The Board of Directors made many amendments to that recommendation and ended with, for the period of December 1st, 2020 through January 28th, 2021, no spectators would be allowed for CASHA-sponsored interscholastic high school activities of basketball, bowling, scholars bowl, swimming, and diving and wrestling, along with masking and social distance requirements already established, along with extending the winter practice or competition moratorium from December 23rd through January 3rd, and then an extended competition moratorium of January 4th through January 7th, where the first possible day of competition after winter break would be January 8th.
The board of directors' decision was appealed in case the procedures were followed. It seems that this is the first time in known history that a board of directors' decision had been appealed. The Acacia Appeal Committee voted 7-1 to send the decision back to the board of directors with suggestions for action that included a recommendation to allow for attendance of 1 or 2 parents, guardians per athlete at events. So on December 8th, the board of directors reconvened after many amendments. The following was decided. Effective Thursday, December 10th through January 28th, 2021, interscholastic activities will allow for attendance up to 2 parents or guardians per participant's family to be allowed, as allowed by local board of education or health department restrictions. Still, the masking orders are in place. The only thing that was overturned or reversed or revisited or whatever you want to say through the appeals and the reconvening was the attendance by spectators. And then with that, Acacia came out with some guidelines, clarifications and interpretations for consistency across that. Participants include players, coaches, student managers, cheer squads, dance teams, pet bands, student journalists. Coaches may have parents or parent, guardian, or spouse, significant other that attend as their spectator. Children of coaches and administrators do not meet the definition approved by the board of directors. School board members do not meet the criteria established by the board of directors unless their child is an active participant. Parents or guardians are there to support their child while in competition. There's no reason for them to attend all games in the facility on a given day. Teams playing in that facility as part of a multi-game event may remain in the gym as long as they are socially distant. All spectators must be masked the entire time in the facility, even if they're socially distanced. No substitutes for parent or guardian if they're unable to attend the contest. Event staff are not afforded parent, guardian, or spouse attendance. And the impacted interscholastic activities include basketball, bowling, debate, forensic speech, scholars bowl, swim and dive, and wrestle. And then today we got another update of clarification that if a mother has their infant there for the purposes of they are nursing that child, then the infant can attend also the mother.
He's gonna have to.
So, there's been some questioning about what constitutes a parent or guardian. And I think in their clarifications, it made it pretty clear there's no substitutes for parent or guardian. In my mind, I use the term legal in a document I sent out just to clarify that. And in my mind, it comes down to, here's the definition. If we send a letter home that says to the parents or guardians of this child, where's it getting mailed?
To their house.
To me, that's their parent or guardian. Okay, it's not aunt or uncle that want to see the game and we're designating them the guardian at that time. That's not where it's at. This is a lot different mentality than we were in the fall. During the fall, we were, I know I was looking at our 25% number and trying to figure out how I could wedge as many people in and still be at that 25%, have spectators and everything. We're in a different time than we were then with the spread and the numbers. And that's what this is all about. I mean, I fully understand no spectators and the concern by parents of what if something happens and I'm not there and those things. And I think those are legitimate concerns. But our number is, we aren't trying to pack the stadium as much as we can at this point. We're trying to mitigate the spread and still provide that opportunity. And when we were providing multiple tickets per family in the fall, all of a sudden we had student sections, or we had people that didn't have family contacts that were there. Tickets were being, raffled, for lack of a better term, handed out. And that creates a situation that you can't control some things on. So the interpretation is more strict through Acacia on what a parent or guardian is. It also goes into participants. If we would have a family that had a daughter playing basketball, a son playing basketball, and a daughter or son doing cheerleading, they have 3 kids being active that night. It's still just 2 parent, guardian, per family. It's not 6 in that case. So that clarification goes on to that point. Flexibility that goes into it, because not all activities are the same. Not all things within an activity are the same. Not all venues are the same. And not all communities will be the same. So when you look just within our facilities for basketball and wrestling here at Abilene, the middle school utilizing Eisenhower that has very limited seating compared to our main gym, 2 totally different things. Our gym B in comparison to our main gym, 2 totally different things. So there's going to be a lot of considerations and things to be put in place. I'm going to let Mr. Burns speak now about what he's doing at the middle school, then I'll come back and talk about what we're going to look to do at the high school.
Thanks. All right, at AMS, we go back to the mask mandate. What we're doing is we're practicing fully with masks on. And then when it comes to game time or competitions, then we're playing the game, with the mask down. So we're competing with it down. But any other time we put the mask back on. Our coaches, they need a big shout out in this. They're doing an excellent job of mitigating risks. They're doing above and beyond what we're asking them to do to try to be safe. And we appreciate, I want to send that out, that we appreciate everything that they're doing. In terms of spectators at AMS, we've thought about this a lot. We feel like at the middle school with our gym size there, that we're going to plan, and our next event is not till boys basketball, so January 11th. But we're going to plan on having 2 home spectators and then 1 visitor. That keeps us where we feel like it's a safe environment. Eisenhower, Will touched on Eisenhower. It is a different environment, but I think we can format the game where we can still offer 2 home and 1 visitor, and here's how. Our plan is to really communicate well with ADs and coaches and see who's playing in the A game. In our situation, we have 20 students potentially playing or 20 athletes playing in an A game. We're going to allow fans to come in. Two spectators would be a parent and guardian. They come in for the A game if their child's playing in that A game. And then we have that 10-minute warm-up break. If they're not playing in the B game, we're going to send them out. And then we're going to allow the B parents to come in. And we've looked at the numbers even on the high side there, and we still feel like Jenna and I, we've been in that gym and we've looked at it, and we feel comfortable doing that format. So that's our plan to start, to try to keep that consistency. But we feel like if we can get people out of the building, if their child's not playing, and we're still offering the streaming at that point in time so they can still watch the game, that's going to give everybody the chance to be a parent to be there or guardian to be there during that time.
Quick question. Have you thought about using the high school gym for that secondary event? I mean, it is our biggest gym.
Right. We have, but I think the scheduling up to this point, I haven't talked to Will about that, but we have the games scheduled, and if we feel like we can keep, I would think about that if we were down to definitely 1 spectator, where it wasn't equal or consistent. But I think in this case, if we can keep it consistent at 2 and 1, and get people out after that first game, then I think that we can make it work. Of course, we'll reevaluate just like we do all the
everything.
time.
Yeah.
So.
Have you figured out how to use the camera well in Eisenhower?
Just gonna ask that too.
Yeah, so I'm working with Mike consistently with that. Mike's going to touch a little bit on streaming coming up, but to touch on that with the middle school gym especially, we've made huge strides with that, and another shout out to Mike. I mean, him and his group. We couldn't see the scoreboard early on, and we never went into this thinking we were going to have no fans, and then we got that thrown on us, and he worked really well on trying to get that down, and then it's processed too. It just doesn't happen overnight. So then it's got to calibrate. Well, finally we got the scoreboard on there, so now I can show that. Other than that, I was standing on, like some of you saw, I was standing on a ladder holding a whiteboard up to show the score to people at home. So we were doing whatever we could to try to get that information to them, to give them the best viewing experience. That was our goal.
There's no work comp coverage if you stand on a ladder.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay, so what's being done at AHS? Well, the same thing as far as we are to be in compliance with our county health officer's order during practices, and we are masking up all basketball players and wrestlers. We are choosing that during competitions, those that are actively participating in the game can take their mask down. We expect them to put their mask back up once they've exited the game. That also means that when they're doing warm-ups and those type of things, they should be masked. Just that's to be in compliance with the order that we were handed. Also, we think it's healthy, or it helps provide mitigation for COVID. We were at Baldwin this past Friday for wrestling. They were required to compete in masks there. Okay, all Topeka public schools are required to play basketball in masks, the game. So it's like everything else. It varies across the state on what's being done. I thought wrestling would be impossible, but our wrestlers have done a really nice job of adapting and making it work. And so we'll keep going with that. And while we're talking about basketball or wrestling, we hosted Beloit on December 10th for a duel. We did allow 2 spectators that night. It was the first evening that you could. Duels are different than tournaments, though. I mean, we only have 2 teams there, limited numbers, and a lot of space. We could do that. We're going to host tournaments this Friday and this Saturday, hopefully, if we don't quit losing teams throughout it. We are not going to allow spectators. We just do not have the space for a wrestling tournament and the nature of them to spread people out. We think with 8 teams coming in for a wrestling tournament on Saturday, we can assign 8 different sections of bleachers throughout the gym. That's your team space. That's where you go when you're not actively wrestling. You stay there and you quit intermingling with others. When we do that, we lose seating for spectators. And then you got to consider that our whole lower west side of our gym, those bleachers are pushed in so that our table workers and referees can be separated and not exposed or have to be within 6 feet of several people all day long. So that's where we get to. Not all activities are the same, and even within the activity, it's not always the same, because a duel in wrestling is much different than a tournament is, as far as makeup and how many people that are there. Likewise, things that we're doing differently. Last year, we combined with our JV wrestling tournament. We started a girls tournament to run at the same time. Because of number of entries and restrictions under Acacia guidelines, you can't have more than 8 teams or 112 entries in a wrestling tournament. We've had to break that off. We will now be having our girls tournament on Friday, January 15th to provide them an opportunity. We will just be running JV boys primarily, along with our 3 girls if they enter on this Friday, and they'll wrestle boys. I lost in my notes, sorry. Hosting a varsity tournament on December 19th, normally 12 teams. 9 said that they would come. We were able to do that because it was going to still be around 112 entries with opens. And then we had a team cancel this morning because their whole team went into quarantine. So they've removed themselves from the tournament. No spectators, 8 teams need space. We've talked about that. We will, on these tournaments, I'm trying hard to use parents as workers so that they have the opportunity to be there. And if they're occupying a workstation, then that's designated space where they can be. It's kind of a win-win for me and them. They get to be there, and I get the help I need to run the tournament. Basketball, truthfully, I don't know yet. How our basketball games are formatted with girls and boys all on the same night. It's just not basketball 3 levels. It's also cheer, it's pep band, and it's AHS singers and all of those things. When we hosted Rock Creek last Tuesday, we did have a pep band of 39 members. They sounded awesome. It was great to have them there. They took up the whole upper deck on the east side to do that. I can't afford that much seating if we're going to have spectators. We think, in talking to Mr. Tompkins, we think we can get down to about 26 band members if we use the south balcony and one section of bleachers on the east side. He thinks he can produce good sound, have a pep band that's noticeable, and go from there. But how that impacts the rest of our seating, I don't know yet. I haven't had a chance because we also lose all of our lower west seating when we host, because those bleachers are pushed in order to have chairs for the players and provide table space spread out for all of our workers. So there's that to deal with. How many do you allow? Well, I guess my ultimate goal would try to get 2, but when you consider 30 boys basketball players, a little over low 20s on girls basketball players, 10 cheerleaders, 26 band members, those numbers get up there pretty quick. I agree with Mr. Burns that we're going to have to request that people only come and watch their child and then leave. I have some apprehension that people will do that. I can't see clearing out. Once we get started into the sequence of the night, I don't see us clearing out a gym to repopulate the gym. I don't think that's feasible. So again, we're going to have to look on what we need to do there. Things to consider, Gym B is pretty limited in seating to start with. We lose all the lower west seating to accommodate team seating and table workers, requesting persons only stay with their child when they're actively participating. So what do you do with a kid that's both a varsity and a JV basketball player? And one of those games is at 4:30 and one of those games is possibly at 7:30. Okay, so what do you do in the time in between? Ask them to leave and come back? I don't know.
Our restaurants might appreciate that.
What do you do with cheer and pep band when they're active for both varsity games? Now, that's a lot of dedicated seating when you got 36 potential people and their parents are, if you're allowing the spectators. That's a lot. That's up to 72 spots. Other things to consider, no outside food to aid in the masking, so people can't use that as an excuse, no concessions. Also, that makes them less likely to want to stick around any longer than they have to in order to watch games. That's, I hope to have something over break where I can sit down and see how many spots we totally have. Do we, is it a 2-in-1 situation like Mr. Burns talked about? Possibly. I would hate to see 0 visiting spectators, because then I think that comes back and bites us in the rear end when we want to travel and they say you didn't allow ours, so we're not going to allow yours. Type of situation. Cheer, another thing to think about, or just to inform you. If there's more than one mat used at a contest by Acacia guidelines, cheer is not to attend because you're getting the space limitations within the facility. So if you have a duel and you're only using one mat, cheer can be there. But if you're using multiple mats, they're limiting out the cheer, the ability for cheer, because they're right down there on mat side, close. So we are taking our basketball cheer to as many places as we can, as many of them as we can. So when we went to Smoky Valley, we have 10 members on our basketball cheer squad. They would only allow 8. Okay, Augusta allowed 10, but only 8 of them could be on the baseline at one time. The other 2 had to sit or rotate in. So at home, we're allowing all 10 of ours to be up. So it's that's that variance.
What is the capacity of our auxiliary gym and our main gym? Like what, like fire marshal, like what's the maximum number? And would you, when considering how many guests, is that a number that you take into, like,
Probably footage, isn't it? 6 feet.
well, like when you're figuring for volleyball percentage wise?
When we were figuring for volleyball, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. Sorry to
That's okay.
to say that.
That's okay.
There's another difference in that we're supposed to be more socially distanced or probably really socially distanced. And typically, when you go and calculate seating for like gym usage and things, if you're gonna host postseason, 18 inches of seat space is considered. My rear end doesn't fit on an 18-inch.
Neither does mine.
Okay. So we're gonna have to be more, that's why I need more
Why are you
time.
laughing, Brandy? That's me.
I'm truthful, I know. I need more time where I can go in and mark off, here's a 6-foot space. Okay, so that would be every 4 seats cut out in our benches would be 6 foot roughly, because they are an 18-inch seat. That's when you see the individual looking, they are 18 inches.
So a couple though would be, you have a couple together, then 6 feet between the parents.
Yeah, there's some deliberation on how that works. I mean, because what if it's an individual? Well, they're at that 6 feet. What if it's a pair? Well, I don't know how, that's where it gets.
I think what you're saying is not everybody 6 feet, like,
Right.
if there's 2 parents, then obviously the parents.
And not like, well, so not everybody's gonna be there. Not everybody's gonna be there. There's a couple, again, obviously situations, whatever else, blah, blah. But yeah.
Well, I think,
I think you have to go in and mark out, these are 6-foot spots. And, I'm imagining that there is a piece of orange tape on the bleacher, and if you or your partner sit on that spot, then the next available spot is here. And that's about as close as we're gonna be able to get to social distancing.
well, and I'll say, that I know that obviously there's been a lot of thought that it's gone into this, and I know we'll continue to go into this. I know from my perspective, and I'm sure from everybody else's too, we know both you and Derek are, do your job in a very professional manner, and so there's no doubt in my mind that you'll get as many people in as we can get in. The one thing that I think needs to be said here is that, look, everybody wants to go. I get that. I'd urge our patrons who want to go, who get the opportunity to go, abide by the rules. Don't press the issue. You got in the game, wear your mask. Don't cause a problem. And if there's a problem, get them out. I mean, I know that's easier said than done, but it's a reward system that we even get to go at this point. I'm glad our kids have an opportunity to be there, opportunity to get to perform. It really stunk when I'm sitting there watching my kid on live feed. So when you get there, do what you're supposed to do.
Any other questions?
Thank you both for all your time on this.
Okay, we're rolling right down the line here. Mike, we'd like to have you share just a little bit about the music feed, copyright, that kind of thing that comes up with our live streams.
Yeah, so we're streaming, like all the gyms, just so we're all aware. When it comes to sound, and we put it out, it just comes down to what the person that wrote the music, who owns the copyright, and what they want to do. 95% of the time, we can go in later and we can answer some questions, and get that stream back up. But it can shut down on a moment's notice, and they'll tell us this thing. Some copyrights say, no, I will not allow that to go on anymore, and just not even let us do it. We've not had any of those yet, but I just want you to be aware, we're playing with the sound a little bit. Even the band playing a piece of music can potentially catch a bot and shut us down. Haven't had that one yet, but we have had some piped in music ones. several times come in and do that to us. So I wanted everybody, it's kind of a weird deal. Back in the old days, someone would hear it, hey, you're on YouTube, and I'd file a claim and they could shut it down that way, but now it's all automated. So the sound, I had the sound actually turned off for the last, was it a basketball game, the one we did at home?
The JV game, I know.
Actually, it's interesting because, when you mess up, man, you've got some great people that are right there on my phone to let me know. And I thought I had it right, man. We had the game, and a camera pointed at the scoreboard, and we didn't have any sound, and someone says, well, I can't hear anything. I'm like, are you missing the shoes? So there's a huddle camera, so I turned on the sound on that in the second game, but then the music started playing. So Charity's doing an awesome job during the stream, making some great graphics and trying to, so we knew Trent wasn't going to be there, so we tried to, she's come up with some awesome stuff to do it during the stream, but we're managing the sound, trying to, so there might be times when it gets cut out that we could just, and it doesn't matter, it could be Trent's own mic, it could be his mic. I mean, if it goes out on YouTube, it doesn't really care how it got there. That potential's there. I want everybody to be aware that that's probably could happen, and if we lose the stream, then we're gonna be down for a little bit, stuff like that.
I think, I think people were thinking of volleyball, we've done it, it's probably a pretty seamless thing, but obviously they didn't have band at volleyball, and so I get the music thing, but it was just like the JV game didn't have sound, but then the freshman game, so I think people were just like.
They like the freshman better.
Now, that was a little different because the freshman was the middle game, and JV game was first, so. Yep. So I just wanted to be aware.
Thanks, Mike.
And my parents appreciate it. They love following the kids so they can watch at home, and so it's wonderful. Thank you.
Tell your parents thank you also from us.
Hey, we're not done yet, guys. We're gonna be here another hour.
No drinks. Broke her laptop too.
Hey, Brandy, I'm gonna go ahead and let you share the latest on quarantines. It's no longer the 14-day piece. If you want to just kind of jump through that real quick explanation on that, you have about 45 seconds.
Okay. So they changed the quarantine. It's 14. It went from 14 days to 10. There you go.
There you go.
That's it in a nutshell. Yeah, there you go. So KDHE did adopt that. Our local county adopted that as well. So now when a student is quarantined, they are quarantined 10 days from the point of contact versus 14. So that has been implemented, and that has worked well. There was a transition period, and there's some questions about that. That transition period was set by the county. It wasn't set by us. There was no arbitrary. The disease no longer is 14, is contagious 14 days. You're actually still in a contagious period for 14 days, but they're allowing you to remove yourself from quarantine at day 10 with the intent that you should still be aware of your personal health for those remaining 4 days. And if you were to exhibit any type of symptoms, then you should seek medical care just like you would for any other point in time. But I think that was a nice welcome change for many people, and it's kind of a step in the direction that I think you all were hoping for. The other question that's come up recently are many pharmacies are offering antibody testing, and so that has come up. If you have gone to one of these pharmacies and you do the testing and you have positive antibodies, does that make you so you are not able to be quarantined? And the answer to that is no. We consulted with KDHE on that because, well, I didn't know the answer either, so I asked that question. They consulted with KDHE, and the epidemiologist said you must have, in conjunction with positive antibody tests, you have to have a positive PCR test, meaning you have to have a positive test when you became ill. So just because you have the antibodies does not negate the necessity for quarantine. So those were two questions that we had recently posed and were given answers to from KDHE.
The other local question is, our county did not adopt the 7-day with a negative test and probably not going to, so.
Correct. There was a provision from KDHE that offered at day 7, you could potentially take a test, a PCR test, which would be the longer test. A rapid test would not have sufficed for that requirement. And if you tested negative, then you could be out of quarantine. As I understand, the rationale for our county not adopting that was due to the lack of test availability that we have. And they wanted, currently our testing capability went from 40 down to roughly 22 per day because of test availability. And with that, they had to look at, those test slots get filled. Usually they're getting filled and you're getting sent to the next day, potentially, depending on when you call in. And they wanted to make those tests available to those that were exhibiting symptoms versus somebody that was not exhibiting symptoms and wanting to be off of quarantine. So that was their rationale. Secondly, if you're doing the longer term test, you probably aren't getting out of there until day 10 anyway. I mean, in all honesty, because it takes about 2 to 3 days to get that test
I
results.
just wanted you to say that, so in case anybody's listening, they've heard that.
Absolutely.
That is what we're following. So,
right.
Thank you.
Right. Now the drive-through tests remaining from that time frame that the county still had, and so they were able to reutilize those at that point in time.
Okay.
But those were not rapid tests.
Okay.
They were taken after being swabbed. They were taken to the KDHE lab in Topeka by the county emergency preparedness coordinator, and then they were ran there, and then of course the test results.
Because those are some of the questions I had, because like when Dr. Holmes was on the radio, he said that, they used to be able to test 40, then it went to 28 and now 22. But then people are like, well, then how can you have these mass drive-through clinics if you don't have enough tests? So thank you for clarifying. Those drive-throughs came from KDHE.
They did.
Not from our local.
No, not from our local
Thank you.
agency. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Have any other questions that I could? Burning questions that you've ever wanted to know?
Do you really like Derek?
That remains.
Has answered the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah. Sibling love,
Okay. Are we done with all things COVID?
We have 2 brief explanations, I believe. Still, are you kind of following some things? I think Ben and Jenna both have just the briefest of explanations. There's some things that they're working on for next semester. I'm not even going to mess with the big screen. They'll just use the speakers. So Jenna, you want to go first, please?
Sure thing. We have rearranged all of our student schedules for second semester so that they will be in cohorts. And I explained that in some more detail in my board report, so I won't go into too many details. But ultimately what that does is it keeps them all together in their core classes and their STAR. So that we started with STARs and then expanded those into core classes. And then they are still mixed up for their related arts classes just because of the nature of the beast, but it reduces the possible quarantine contacts from 8 opportunities throughout the day to just 3 or 4. Because we've also, all of our teachers have also made all of their seating arrangements similar from hour to hour. So basically there's a core group of like 2 or 3, 4 maybe kids in each cohort that might potentially be quarantined. So our goal is to take it down from about 30 at the beginning of the year that were affected by any given positive case to maybe 5-ish. So that's one of the major efforts we're making.
And at the high school, we sent via OneDrive form question to all of our staff members to measure their rooms and see how many kids they could hold in their room max if they were able to utilize 6-foot spacing. We can avoid quarantines if we had the ability to go into 6-foot social distancing spacing in our classrooms. So the mathematics behind a classroom don't necessarily match up with how many kids can fit in there, because in one scenario, there's a classroom that can hold 20 kids, but they'd have to have their nose up against the wall and kids would have to have their backs up against the wall. So the seating arrangement in that regard isn't feasible, but what is feasible? And so we ran that number against our schedule for next year, for next semester, and we found that we have a good number of classes that would be essentially, for lack of a better word, quarantine proof. That if there was a positive student in there, we wouldn't have to send anybody home to quarantine due to being a close contact. And so we've thrown around some ideas about where we might be able to station some other classes. We're still having those discussions. But part of the schedule also would be to try to remove kids from one class, put them in another section of that class, perhaps in the second 9 weeks or the first 9 weeks of the semester, and just try to reduce the class load as much as possible throughout the building. We're not going to get it perfect, and we're not going to get it to where every class is going to be small like that. But we have at least half, if not more, maybe not quite as high as 2/3, but a really, really fair amount of classrooms where we feel we can get kids distanced apart.
Good deal.
Like Rob said earlier, the whole idea is to keep kids from getting sick. And the secondary thing is if we can keep kids from quarantining, then we can keep them in class. And, that's the overall goal, and be able to do so safely. And this is going to help us to go that far. But again, it's not perfect. Our building simply isn't big enough to allow all classrooms to do that. So we're exploring options and working from there.
I appreciate the comments and all you guys are doing for the distancing and stuff like that. I had some comments from teachers that didn't feel like they were getting any extra cleaning. And I don't know if that's been addressed or if that's been brought up or not, but we were under the impression that there was deep cleaning and extra things happening this year. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at that, and if we can do anything different there, I want to do that, because I've had teacher comments that haven't noticed anything different. I don't know who to address that to, but I wanted to bring it up tonight, so.
Yeah, we've heard some too. They're doing their best. The custodial staff has a lot of stuff on their plate right now. And I think what they're doing is they're doing a really good job of working on surfaces where kids are touching. What might be lacking a little bit, and I can only speak for our school, is that there might be some floors that aren't getting the attention they need. And so mopping and sanitation it's not that the floors are dirty, but it's not that they're being necessarily disinfected with the regularity that the touch surfaces are. So tables, countertops, things like that, door handles, our staff's doing a really good job of that. And so there's some things that they can't quite fit in. So instead of doing a really thorough mopping every day or every 2 days, maybe it's every 3 or 4 now, but it's still, like I said, they're doing their best.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will just add, at the middle school, I'm not sure if the comments you've gotten were from our school, but our teachers are doing a great job every hour. I swear they're going to get carpal tunnel from spraying those spray bottles so much. But they spray in between, they spray down pencils. I mean, they go crazy with it. And then our custodial staff honestly doesn't need to do anything additional to what they normally do, because they use antibacterial products every single night. And so they're doing just their normal cleaning with the same products that are recommended to work against COVID. So there's that.
Yeah, our teachers have worked their kids through the same thing. So they're hitting their tables and surfaces between classes, but the deep cleaning and disinfecting on top of that the custodial staff is doing is in addition to what the teachers are doing.
Thank you guys very much. Mr. Brown, is there any action we need to take with these recommendations that have been given?
Yes, we would need approval for the release time, lesson development, the expanded use of virtual program, and the hiring of support personnel to help manage quarantine and other remote learners as presented.
I would make a motion that the board accept those recommendations that you just listed.
Second.
Been moved by Randy and seconded by Veronica to accept the recommendations presented. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. All right, 5.2, man, it just feels like we just got started. Free meals.
Yes, we have an opportunity that came out of discussion for our food advisory committee that met recently and brainstormed how can we continue to meet needs of students and our families. We know those needs have continued to increase. One of the ways we can do that is to provide meals over the winter break, trying to look at how we schedule that so that individuals still have some time off, but that we're still getting meals out. So if we set that up on a distribution that on Monday, meals are handed out for Monday and Tuesday, families would receive 2 breakfasts and 2 lunches for each of the children ages 1 through 18. We can use a format similar to what we've used previously with the survey, making a couple changes to that format online so they can mark which days they would want to pick up meals, because we know some families may have plans, may not be in the area, and we don't want to have meals prepared that would not be picked up. So really just looking for approval to change our site applications and to provide these meals over the break when we're not in session, because typically we only provide meals on days that we have as school attendance days. And if you have any other questions about that, I could go over it in more detail.
And we would have the staff to cover those, and that's all worked out with OPA.
Working with OPA, and Becca and I have been working through that. She has that staffing. Once I knew that we had approval for this, then I would have a couple of individuals from our side. I already have one person that I know is interested in helping that would do the tallying and the delivery for our side. So it would be a joint effort.
I move to approve the serving of the meals as presented.
Second.
Moved by Jennifer, seconded by Rob. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Right. Want to also then request permission to add an Intro to Healthcare course to our high school schedule. There were some details included. This would allow us to build an additional pathway for a health science pathway. We currently have 13 pathways, and this would make a 14th as an introductory course to that pathway. Dr. Smith, do you want to add anything else to that?
Pathway development is oftentimes based on the kinds of jobs that we're hoping will be available or that have huge needs in the future in Kansas. And so healthcare is one of them. And so we have a number of kids who are involved in healthcare classes, but we don't have an official pathway of course offerings in order to support that. So by adding this course, Introduction to Healthcare, that's an intro level course that would allow us to fund anatomy and physiology as a CTE related course. In other words, every student who's in those courses in the first semester would count as funded students then. And then that's the technical level. And then the application level course would be the CNA courses that students take over at the Salina Area Technical College. Ideally, and we talked about this a number of years ago, and hopefully we can get back to it again. Ideally, we get enough kids interested in it that's a class that we teach on site or somewhere nearby. So we don't have to transport kids to Salina. Salina could offer us an instructor, but then they would learn close by. What that location looks like, we don't know yet, but we've been in the infancy of discussion on how to provide that space. So that's the overall goal, and we can't do that without that required Introduction to Healthcare course.
Is there a teacher? Is there a teacher already that'll step in and teach this?
There are multiple certifications that are qualified to teach this course, and Dr. Smith is reviewing class schedules and finding a good fit for that.
I think it's great.
I absolutely do too. I know looking through when the seniors go through all the scholarships, so many of them are going into the healthcare field. I think it's a great addition.
I move to approve the addition of the Introduction to Healthcare course for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second. Moved by Chris, seconded by Jeff to add the additional course. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. 6.1.
Okay, fall activities review, winter activities preview. Just very briefly, in the briefest of manners,
We got a lot of them.
Derek, go for it. I'll let you start middle school.
I'll be brief. all things considered, we had a pretty good fall. We knew we would, be missing out on some games, so just can't give you an idea. Our volleyball season, we completed about 3/4 of what we could have with the season. We were 2 weeks remote during that time in our fall season. Cross country participated in 5 of the 7 total meets, and then football played 5 of the 7 total games. So all in all, when we were going in, we were pretty pleased that we were able to complete all that. And then we finished really strong. Our 7th grade volleyball team won the NCKL title. That's a pretty big accomplishment, knowing that we had a 2-week remote time where they had no practice, no activities, and really only a week to prepare after that. So, that was pretty remarkable. And then our 7th grade football team went undefeated in the league and won the 7th grade title. So we got those plaques and put them up in the gym. So it's a pretty good accomplishment there. And then we just wrapped up our first part of our winter today. We had our girls basketball was able to participate in 7 out of the 12 games, and we rescheduled and did everything we could to get as many games possible there. And then our wrestling, out of all things considered, we had a really good season there. We participated in 4 out of 6 duels, and we were undefeated in all those duels. So we had a really good season with wrestling. So
awesome.
Anyway, and we were on remote for 1 week during that time. So that's kind of the look back at the fall and first part of winter, and then our boys basketball start practice tomorrow, and their first game is January 11th. So
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Will, you got a snapshot?
In football, due to COVID quarantines and various other things, we lost 3 varsity games, 2 freshman JV dates. We did pick up a couple of freshman dates in there to make up for league schools that didn't have C team or freshmen. So they, instead of losing 4 more games, they only lost 2 out of that season. Volleyball, we lost 2 varsity tournaments, 2 freshman competitions, and 3 JV competitions, or mainly tournaments. We were able to make up all of our duels that we'd missed through quarantine. It was one hectic week of volleyball there towards the end. Within 10 days, I think 4 duels in a tournament in that span. Girls tennis, we lost 4 JV competitions and 3 varsity competitions. And unfortunately, one of those varsity competitions was a league meet, where we do believe we would have been league champions had we been able to play, but we were not. Also, it's the first time in a long time that we didn't have any state qualifiers because of the restricted numbers or the reduced numbers qualifying to the state tournament. We were first place out in 2 divisions from being able to attend. Those people would have qualified in the past. Cross country lost 2 meets due to quarantine. First time since 2004, I believe, that we had a team qualify. Our boys qualified for the state meet, so that was very good. It's also exciting that all 7 of those runners return for us moving forward. We did have a girls' state qualifier, and we would have had a second if it was a normal year, but with restrictions on limited number. Once again, our Eden Bathurst was first out on not qualifying as an individual. So COVID bit us again there. Our crossover activities, debates having moderate success. Everything they're doing is virtual right now. I still haven't wrapped my brain around it after being in high school debate. I don't know how you can debate when you can't see the person you're debating against in the same fashion that in time. Scholars Bowl is doing really well right now. They're doing combinations of virtual and in person. It's just depending on what the host school wants to do. We're going to be hosting league Scholars Bowl in January. We were able to host our tournament in November in person, and the team won, so it was good. Our poor musical. Wow. Okay, so the original shows were November 5th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. We go into quarantine. The cast goes into quarantine, so they can't perform. So, okay, we'll reschedule to the November 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. We can do this. Lose a couple key cast members, so we can't pull that off. And then with the original Acacia No Spectators, we were looking at January's out. But now with bringing back two parent guardians. We're looking at January 10th, 9th and 10th, that's a Saturday and Sunday, to have two performances to allow parents to come in and watch their kid. And then it'll also have the pay-per-view option for non-parents that want to watch the show. So going to two. Cheerleading, congratulations to our state runner-up for a cheerleading squad. Exceptional job on their part. So the trophy and medals arrived late last week. Eventually we'll have some public presentation of those and make sure that they get honored in an appropriate way. Another one that's taken a beating here through COVID and started all the way back in continuous learning was dance. We weren't, with the coaching change and going into continuous learning, we weren't able to do tryouts last spring. We weren't able to hire a coach until September. We had tryouts set up. We were moving forward. We go into quarantine. We come out. We try and get it going again. The coach goes into quarantine. We try and go and get it going again. And it's been tough to find time. So probably after the first year, we'll try again and see if we can get girls at least practicing and working on dance, even though their performance dates will be pretty limited. Winter wrestling, we've got about 22 kids out. We have 5 girl wrestlers now. We had 3, then 2 managers made the conversion over. So they started today was their first day of practicing. Although one of them scored varsity points for us Friday night. We have a girl wrestler that can fill our 106-pound weight class. And she was cleared, and so Coach Stout in his great vision saw that the team that we were opposing did not have a physical body to put in at 106. So hey, here you go, you're in. You can walk out, have your arm raised, you're worth 6 points. The next 2 teams we faced did have physical bodies. He didn't send her out there. So, he played his cards how he could. We've gotten off to a strong start, 8-1 in duels so far this year, so that's good. Talking about a sport, here's what we're going through, okay? So to give you a capstone of what winter's looking like. The Walmigo tournament, which was the first Saturday of December, got turned into 2 quads. So we wanted, in order to meet the number of participants eligible. So that happened. Douglas dropped us from this past Saturday because we were the last team to enter their tournament, so we were the first team out, and they had to get down to their entry restrictions. So that's why we ended up on Baldwin at Friday night in order to reschedule, in order to get their meets. We already talked to you about our tournaments. We are going to Augusta this Thursday. We're going to double duel with Augusta and Bueller. That's going to replace when Augusta was supposed to come to us on January 7th. But because of the new competition moratorium, that had to be moved. The only date we could find is this Thursday the 17th. So we lost a home date, but we're getting to wrestle. So that was the trade-off. Harrington, which is the first tournament in January, has dropped their JV and girls portion of that tournament. So we are looking to get into Salina South that day with some kids and still send kids to Harrington so that all of our people can be competing somehow. Baser Linwood dropped us from a 2-day tournament, so that's why we're putting in our girls tournament and the second quad that we're going to host on January 16th. The Beloit tournament that's normally 2 days has gone down to 1 day. Manhattan dropped our JV tournament. And then the bombshell today, I should say bombshell, that's not fair. The major alteration to our schedule, starting in February for wrestling, the first weekend is now going to be district wrestling. Every weekend in February, Friday, Saturday, will be some combination of state qualifying tournament. So first weekend is districts, where girls are on Friday, boys are on Saturday. The next weekend is regionals, where the boys will be on Friday, the girls will be on Saturday. The weekend after that, sub-state, where the girls will be on Friday, the boys will be on Saturday. And the weekend after that is state, where the girls are on Saturday, or Friday, the boys on Saturday. So we're going to lose 2 tournaments and 2 duels out of out of February in order to accommodate the new state format. We're trying to get those duels into January because those are league events. So basketball's guidelines for the postseason also came out today, and I haven't had the time to sit and study the impact of those. It's not going to be nearly as dramatic as what this is. Talking about basketball, we got 22, 23 girls out, 30, 32 boys. We lost varsity and JV versus Smoky Valley to start the year, not being able to play those games due to quarantining. We looked at maybe next week on Monday or Tuesday trying to make those games up, and Smoky Valley was unable to. Continue to look after break to see if we can find those. Our girls have lost Rock Creek, Augusta, and Southeast of Saline. Tomorrow we are going to be able to go to Concordia on Friday, we believe, but then we were informed that Concordia's JV team is not, the girls' JV team is not going to be able to play because they were exposed by a player that they played against, so that knocks out their JV. They already didn't have a C team, and they are sitting with 6 bodies to play a varsity game on Friday. So if one of those goes down, we're not playing. Then we would do the shuffle of seeing who could, where could we send our girls possibly, or our boys would go to Concordia and our girls would go to an alternate location. That's just the world we're living in. It could be, when we didn't go to Augusta, when we didn't send our girls to Augusta last Friday, they brought Rock Creek in to fill for us. It's grab and go as you can. I wouldn't be surprised if when we go to Southeast of Saline tomorrow and the boys are playing, we're going to see Rossville's girls there playing. So I know the thought is, well, go ahead and book some of those. We have a Tuesday in February that's open. Find a game now. Well, I might need that to put a league school in, so I'm not really wanting to book out to February at this point in time. Trying to stay more compact on when we do those type of things. So, and then we've rescheduled Chapman, who is supposed to be on January 5th. Yeah, because that's now in the competition moratorium. We can't play them. We've rescheduled them to January 18th. So that's a Monday of the SIT week. And the SIT is still planning on it to be a go. So there you go. There's my nutshell.
Well, thank you both for all of your willingness to adjust and move, and I know our kids appreciate it. And Will, if you ever want to know how you can debate without seeing somebody, you can ask my wife, because she does it a lot over a text message. So 7.1.
Okay, very briefly, capital outlay review. This is getting to be that time of year where we sit down and focus administratively on some capital outlay goals, how it is that we can spend our money in the best fashion to take care of some of our capital projects, and then we schedule a work session with you as a board to prioritize that over a 3 to 5 year plan. We'll pull up last year's plan, review it, and move from there. So that's just kind of a preview of things to consider here in the month of January.
Not setting a date yet.
Not setting a date yet. I think we'll go ahead and do that during the January 11th board meeting. Set the date, kind of also give you a preliminary list of various capital projects that the administrative team would like to consider.
Okay. 8.1 Board Administrator Communication. I know there was a lot of that this month.
Yep, everybody has some things there.
Thank you for everybody for doing that. Do we need to approve that? I don't think we do we?
No, I don't think so. It's just information.
8.2 KASB Convention.
Jennifer, I think you were our delegate. Were you able to attend that thing? There was lots of.
Yep, I did. It was very brief. There wasn't a whole lot to go on. They just had some constitution amendments that they worked on. basically just changing words, like instead of vocational school, they changed it to technical. So it was very small, very short, very brief. They just elected the new president for the association with a Zoom vote, and we were out of there like that. So nothing ground shaking or.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank you for doing that.
Okay, 8.3.
Board Recognition Month is January. Last year, I kind of paraded you out in front of a basketball crowd. Not going to happen this year.
Go somewhere warmer this year?
Usually, and I don't know. I don't even know where exotic places are anymore. We'll go south. How about Marion? Anyway, I do want to take the opportunity somewhere along the line to recognize you individually. I believe we can do so virtually. It's probably what we'll try to do, some things there, or through the newspaper, that kind of thing. Just something that I appreciate all of the dedication you all have to the kids and to the families of the community, and it's good to just take a little bit of time during January and brag on you a little bit, because that's about the extent of your pay, for heaven's sakes. This is a position that does not pay anything, and that's a rare position in politics, if you want to look at it that way. But thank you for everything you do, and we'll figure out a little something to kind of brag on you a little bit individually.
Without the high school athletics pass, I felt like we took a pay cut this year.
I may have to work something out to buy you each a donut and consider Saturday, because we're doing some recognition.
Okay, 8.4, we don't have any other, or we better not.
I do have one very brief other. We had a gift received, a check sent to us by the Knights of Columbus. We're familiar with the Tootsie Roll program. You see them selling the Tootsie Rolls, and they wrote us a check for $799.94 to be used for our special education program. So we'd like to have you accept that gift from the Knights of Columbus.
Okay, we can do one thing.
Make a motion to accept the gift from the Knights of Columbus.
Second.
Motion by Rob, seconded by Jennifer, to accept the gift from the Knights of Columbus and thank them very much for their generousness in that gift.
You bet.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
What's that?
She
It's
liked
getting
your
late. You didn't like my vocab?
Yeah.
All right, 9.1.
9.1 is executive session for personnel. That said, nearly all of those things they're not pressing. They're not something that has to be beat to death tonight. We'd like to go in perhaps to an initial executive session to give you the briefest of outlines of what we have going on here. And then perhaps come out of a brief executive session to determine what the rest of the night would look like. That would be appropriate as well.
Okay.
How long do we need for the brief?
10 minutes to start with, and then we can.
Like a 2-minute break?
Just the two of you in the brief one, or?
I think so, initially, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, Mr. President, I move that we go into executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance. Is that okay? Pursuant to non-elected personnel exception under KWMA. The open meeting will resume in the boardroom in 10 minutes, and we'll invite in Mr. Brown and Mrs. Sprinkle.
Okay.
Second. Moved by Randy, seconded by Jeff. 10 minutes personnel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. that'd
Get
be
an open
fine.
session. Back in open session.
Get anybody to make that motion. Back in open session.
Yep.
I would make a motion that we extend our superintendent's contract for the next school year.
Second.
So motion by Randy, seconded by Chris to extend Mr. Brown's contract 1 year. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay.
Mr. President, I move we go back into executive session for personnel for the same topic we were on before, inviting in Mr. Brown and Mrs. Sprinkle, as well as adding Mr. Burns and Mr. Burton. And go for 25 minutes.
I'd go ahead and start with Mr. Burns and then.
Okay.
Then have him switch places with Mr. Burton. Hopefully a total of 25 minutes should get that done.
Okay. Need a second?
Second.
Moved by Randy, seconded by Jennifer to go back into executive session for matters of personnel, inviting in Mr. Brown, Mrs. Sprinkle, and Mr. Burns and Mr. Burton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay.
stuff, so.
Roll racket.
Okay, we are back in open session.
Looking for another motion, ready?
Any other motions? Anybody want to hang out?
Somebody else do.
Make a motion. We adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Chris, seconded by Jeff to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye, go home. Thank you, Warden.
That was a fun one.
The over-under was way over.